Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to call this meeting to order. We have, first thing on our agenda is the preliminary agenda review. So if you will, please go through this agenda for next week with me. It actually would be the 26th of August, right? And Councilmember Brubaker has the invocation next week. Do the pledge of the flag. The meetings schedule, we're not going to be meeting the day after Labor Day, Tuesday, September 2nd. So there's no meeting on September 2nd. We'll have work sessions on September 9, September 16, and September 23, all at 4 o'clock. And then our regular session will be Tuesday, September 30 at 7 p.m. We have one appointment, the Administrative Hearing Officer, which we previously discussed in executive session. We'll have some guests to talk about the Hagerstown, Highlight Hagerstown Awards, public hearing on the proposed franchise agreement with Antietam Cable Television, which we're going to talk a little bit more about tonight. Minutes. On the consent agenda is an application permit for Leadership Washington County for University Plaza. Any comments on that particular item? The police department has a few items on here. The software agreement for the record management system, the software agreement for the mobile data terminal, and the law enforcement manual subscription service. Any questions on those particular items? All right, Department of Utilities has the SCADA maintenance agreement. What is SCADA, is that? Yeah. I won't ask anyone to try to say what that means. Repair and replacement of the chlorine hoist conductor rail. Any questions on those items? All right. We have the approval of the ordinance we introduced for amending Chapter 197 on the rental facilities to provide necessary support to city neighborhoods, to allow for more inspectors. Any questions on that? Unfinished business. Under new business, we're going to be introducing an ordinance amending Chapter 173, disorderly intoxication. I think the idea here is to make it more in line with the state law.
I have a question on that one.
Yes, sir.
A question and a comment. Mm-hmm. Is there any difference? I understand state law. I guess I'm not quite sure I understand why state law that seems to be applicable to a charter city, why it's applicable to a charter city and why it preempts a local right, number one. And that may not be the right question for you. But is there any difference in these, any difference at all in what these laws say or your ability to enforce public drunkenness?
Well, public drunkenness by itself, and speaking to council, has taken a change over the years, and by itself is not viewed favorably by the court anymore. Public drunkenness has to be tied to an action such as disorder. So when we look to update our public drunkenness to public drunkenness and disorder or disorderly behavior together, that is preempted by state law. So we have to go with the state law. What works out for us is that the state law fits well with our police procedures, with applying it. We can still charge it on a citation. We can do, it's a very quick process for us. But, just being chronically drunk by itself is what's being removed here. What we're seeing, that's pretty much a rare case for us. It's usually drunk and they're causing some type of disturbance that caused the police to come there. They could be drunk and failing to obey, for instance, laying across the sidewalk, blocking free passage. We can still charge with blocking free passage. Normally when we're getting the calls for public drunkenness, it's when we get there, it's because they're causing a disturbance. So the proper charge really is drunk and disorderly behavior together. So that's why we're just going to, rather than, we're not allowed to create our own because there's already a state statute that stands in its place. So we'll just use a state statute. I believe it's a 90-day the maximum charge, so it fits into the minor offense that allows us to charge on a citation.
So there's a uniform state code on
Yes.
that issue.
There are two of them. There's that one. There's one under Article 2B, which is the alcohol enforcement, and then there's disorderly behavior. There's two different areas of the Maryland law that cover this type of behavior. We had one standalone just for drunkenness, which is apparently going by the wayside for the courts.
Well, I'm just concerned because it's part and parcel of the behavior we see downtown in particularly. So.
Right. What we tell people in the community is still call. If you see somebody that's so drunk to the point where they're causing disturbance, give us a call and we can apply this charge.
What about if they're just so drunk they can just barely walk down the street? I mean, they're not necessarily causing a disturbance, but they're, may stumble out into in front of a car or something like that.
Right. For those types of cases, we can take them to the hospital on endangering their own safety. On
But you would still want people
petition.
to call if you see somebody stumbling around the street.
Yeah, call us all the time.
Yeah.
We'll figure out which law applies. They're either going to go to the hospital for being, so intoxicated that they can't even speak.
Because if
we
that
see
were
that
the case, it
sometimes.
wouldn't really do them any good to have a charge of public drunkenness. What they need to do is just get sober or get whatever help they need.
Right. They're taking one of two paths. They're either going to the court or going to the hospital. I mean, it's as much as it causes disturbance, it is very much a health issue, and it'd be nice to get some help from our courts to mandate some treatment. That's one avenue. The other avenue is for us to put in an ambulance and take them to the hospital and just let them get treatment there. We're doing actually both of those. We're splitting it about 50-50 right now. If they're just really intoxicated, they're not causing disturbance, most times they'll elect to go to the hospital because they're feeling that bad. And it voids us from having to come back an hour later and arrest them for a criminal charge. If they're on the edge there where they're refusing any help from the ambulance, but they're still causing a problem to the community, we'll go with the public drunken and disorderly charge together. And in that case, they're still going to end up going to the hospital because the central booking area won't take them if they're that intoxicated. They have to be treated first medically for the health issue. So we give them the citation there at the hospital, and we go back in service. So this is one for more discussion needed as we're moving forward.
Any other comments or questions on this particular item? All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. Item B is amending the drug-free school zone, basically to include the Barbara Ingram School, to amend the map. Any questions on that? Item C, we're going to be discussing tonight the introduction of an ordinance on vacant structures. So depending on whether or not we need more discussion on that, we'll look at that one. Introduction of an ordinance for Chapter 70, cable television and open video systems. Again, that's on for tonight. The ordinance for the Antietam Cable franchise agreement. Again, I think we're going to square away all of that tonight. Approval of a resolution, memorandum of understanding with the HPD and the Sheriff's Department for search and rescue. Any questions on that one? The item G, approval of a new rental agreement, a renewal of agreement between HPD and Drug Enforcement Administration. Any questions on that?
Oh, yes, I do have a question. I don't know if you need to come up. Are the state police participating? I know they dropped out. Are they still out?
They're still out. They're not participating with the Drug Enforcement Administration anymore. They do curriculum. They have regional teams, 4 regional teams.
Yes, but they're not. Is there some other form of coordination since they don't participate anymore?
We do deconflict with them on major cases to take them into our area. We will share information. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
It's more of a homeland security direction they take than localized narcotics.
Right, that's what I was concerned about because I've heard good things about this group. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions on that? Item H under new business is approval of an after-school program at Parkside Community Center. Item I, approval of an after-school program, the BTJ Dance Group. Any questions on those? Item J is approval of a proposal for the R.C. Wilson Phase 4 consent agreement, Hazen and Sawyer. A question about that one? Item K is approval of a purchase, Munis software maintenance renewals. A question on that?
Yeah, I know it says annual. I just want to, I believe I saw annual in here. These are annual, the Munis?
Yes.
Okay.
The item L is approval of funding for the HPD cameras. Talked about that last week. And item M is approval of additional city funding for Children's Village. Any questions about that?
And the motion on that one will clarify that that was funding previously allocated or set aside for the School for Contemporary Arts, who haven't been able to develop the program to receive the funding.
So we can say there's no budget increase on this one?
Well, this is 5,000. They had 4,000
Well, okay.
plus, but we also have a small contingency
Okay.
in the agency account. So between that contingency and the Contemporary School for the Arts funding, you've got it covered.
All right. Thanks for that. Our first juicy item on the agenda is the Augustoberfest. So I'm going to invite Karen Giffen and the rest of the crew to come up. Jill Colbert and Charlie Sekula. The father of Augustoberfest himself, right?
Daddy. Hello, Daddy. How you doing?
I was going to say grandfather, but Don just said, Don's the one that said.
With me today is Jill Colbert. She is the chair of the Augustoberfest Charitable Foundation, and Charlie is the first vice chair, but he's also the founder of Augustoberfest and the Charitable Foundation as a whole. We are coming up on our 19th annual event, and in a second I'll turn it over to them. Earlier today, we had the pleasure of Augustoberfest had donated $5,000 to the Maryland Theater for renovation work and the back stairs and the lights, and we were able to unveil the plaque for this organization. So we've come a long way from our start from very, very few dollars or less than few dollars to where we are to able to make a donation. We are a charitable foundation, and our main thing is to run the event and then also to assist the sister city, but we were, because we had a good year last year, able to do that. It's coming up on the 19th annual. It's this Saturday and Sunday. The main thing, I think, for this table is a keg tapping is at 2 p.m. on Saturday. I do know that most of you are attending. Your tickets and everything are in your boxes if you don't have it. We are getting a number of calls in our office. Last year we had 4,400 people. Out of the 4,400, 500 were children 12 and under. So as you can see, it's a big family event. This year we have an Augustoberfest Fit Walk. We're working with Hill of Washington County. And on Sunday, we're having a German car show, which is the second year, and it is growing like a weed. We already know that there's 30 Porsches coming down from Frederick in a car rally, as well as the main German car show. We have entertainment, we have food, we have a children's area. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jill and Charlie, and a thank you to both of them, all the volunteers. It takes about 200 volunteers this weekend to put this event on. They're cooking, they're cleaning, they're taking tickets, they're smiling at people, they're just doing a number of things. And so we want to thank everyone for making this a signature event for the city and the county as a whole.
Thanks, Karen. First, I'd like to say thank you to the city for partnering with us for the last 19 years. We really enjoy coming together, and Karen is an asset, huge asset to the foundation and the entire weekend event. Just a couple of things just to let you know. I mean, it's been great over the last couple of years to see the attendance rise dramatically since I've been chair in the last...
What do you attribute that to? You said it's doubled in the last 2 years? Is that better marketing, or what do you think that is?
Cleaner volunteers.
What's that?
clean the lawn.
We went through a number of, I guess, phases in
I'll
this
tell Kurt
event.
all that.
And a few years ago, we went to the two-time Augustoberfest, both Saturday and Sunday. We've been able to market that in certain places. I think also it's $5 to get in, and if you're 12 and under, it's free. For the family. And so we market in a number of areas. We get a lot of local people that are here, a lot of citizens, but then we also get tourists from Pennsylvania and throughout. This year, we're going to have a couple coming from out of town celebrating their 50th anniversary, another couple coming from out of town celebrating their first anniversary, and a Smithsburg class reunion. So they come and enjoy it, and I think that just the atmosphere, and I'm sure Charlie and Jill can talk about the look of it and the authenticity of it as well.
Do you want to talk about authenticity?
Well, I really can say, and I've been to the Oktoberfest in Munich 345 times. And it is a miniature Oktoberfest. And people comment on that. They love it. They can't say enough of it. And if I thank them for coming, they say, no, thank you for doing this. When we started out, we had a hard time, very hard time, and which was nothing new to me because I was told I'd be out of business in 3 months. So the Augustoberfest became a major component of the downtown, and like Jill said, we want to thank the city for participating and partnering with us, and please forward to your staff. They're doing an outstanding job, including Karen. They're doing an outstanding job. They're friendly. The police department is there. It is a beautiful combined effort to put this together, and it's a lot of work.
And we really want to thank Eric Dykey and Jim Bender.
Yeah.
We were redoing the layout this year, and I think we went through layout number I, like A through I.
A through I. So, and the committee itself, I mean, we are our worst critic, but we have a good time at it, and I think that's also one of the reasons we really get in and we analyze every single thing year to year to year to try and make it better. And people say, oh, you're doing a great job, and we say thank you, and then on the end we're like, oh, okay, so we can do this one more thing better. And the last year, with the amount of crowd that we had, we were not really anticipating on one night. We came back and we said we have to rearrange the way the logistics look. And we sat as a team and we went through, and God love Jim, I mean, A through I, drawings, trying to break it out. How can we rearrange, knowing that the tent has to stay in a specific area? How can we better the flow so we're not in a bottleneck situation where the folks that were there, they thought it was great. They didn't mind standing in line, but to us, we minded that they stood in line. So when we went through everything, we are now moving the children's area. So the children's area will be at the beginning of the entrance. We pushed back the food in the cook tent so that creates a bigger area open into like the beer garden area, and added a couple more seatings and pushed another beer trailer out. So it should make for better walk flow.
Now here's the most important question. Are you going to have that game where you nail the nails into a trunk with the skinny side of the hammer? Because I've been practicing.
You've been practicing?
Yeah, is there a name for that game in
They
German?
teach you that in Basel?
Yeah, they had me do that a couple times.
How did you make out?
I didn't win. So,
Do they-
but I've been practicing.
No, we don't have that.
It'd be a fun game to
Probably
have.
a good thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. No, that was fun, though. Okay. Well, I would just say keep up the great work. You guys are a great organization. You have a great mission, and I know I want to work on getting more young people involved in the Sister City relationship, and I think Augustoberfest is a great gateway into that with the children's area. And so, like I said, keep up the good work.
Well, I may be the one who founded it, but without the staff as we have it on our board, it would never happen. We work very well together, And I know they're phasing me out. I'm going to retire soon.
Now, he comes up with the ideas. When he comes in and says, I have an idea, we all brace ourselves.
It's been a long 3 months, right, Charlie?
Long
A
time.
long 3 months, yeah. Well, thanks a lot.
Sure.
Thank you for all your help.
It's going to be a great weekend in
Have a great
See you
Hagerstown.
Saturday.
Saturday.
Speaking of a great weekend in Hagerstown, the next item on our agenda is the downtown movement and the pop-up shop event. So I'm going to ask Andrew Sargent, our downtown manager, to come up. I know Rory Daughtridge is here, and is Jackie Beach Walker also here? Okay. And Katie,
Hi.
yes.
Literature. So I'd like to introduce to you the downtown, part of the downtown movement. The downtown movement is much bigger than the three individuals in the table, but those are the brains of the organization. We are really proud to partner with the downtown movement in many ways, but the very first one will be this retail pop-up event this weekend, coordinated with Augustoberfest and everything else that's going on this weekend, including Wind Down Friday.
Thank you. And what is a pop-up shop?
So yeah, why don't I just let them speak?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for being here.
Well, and thank you for
having
having
us.
us. We feel very privileged to be here. And thank you to the city because you have been instrumental. Andrew and Sarah and Aaron and John and Karen have made this possible because it's been a very short time frame. We came to you about 2.5 months ago with this idea. We were a small group just wanting to shine a spotlight on everything that you have done downtown and are doing. And so this was just our first idea to have a pop-up shop. We lived in New York for a while, and in Brooklyn, across the street from Bustin' Boards, there was a revolving pop-up shop, and then it would become filled with a store, and then moves its way down to a next shop. And Williamsburg now is this thriving area in Brooklyn, and at one time people were scared to take the train into Brooklyn. So it was just sort of how it's inspired the idea. And so the pop-up shop is just for a short period of time. You go into a space, you fix it up, you display your work, you get your feet wet as far as what it would be like to have a shop there, and if it seems like the community is interested. And so we thought, let's do that. And then we thought we would do it on a bigger scale, more than one, as many as we can, along with these great events that are already popular downtown. We don't want it to seem like a competing event. We just want people to leave the tents of the Augustoberfest and say, wow, what a beautiful, thriving downtown. This is a glimpse of what it could be like if our restaurants were next to more shops, local artists, a taste of our county, basically. We have so much here as far as farms, and just, it's a very inspiring place. We're just touching the tip of the iceberg at this point. We have a great turnout for the shops, and we're just so excited, and we're learning about so many amazing things our area has. Katie's going to sort of just do a quick overview of who we have, for the
coming.
event.
So hi everybody, I'm Katie Mace, and after I'm finished talking about it, I'll pass around a map so you can kind of get a visual of where things are going to be. But I'll go down the list of some of them that you've probably heard of, and some of them that are new to us and maybe new to you. But Repurposed and Refined is coming, which is a furniture company that they take old furniture and they paint it and they make it kind of look shabby chic or, look new and updated. It appeals to a huge demographic, so I think and they have a huge following themselves, so I think that they'll really be a big draw. We put them in the corner there over at 59 Potomac. Right next to them is Wisteria Manor, which is along the same line, except they don't have big pieces of furniture, they're more accent pieces, so they really fit together. Then 10,000 Villages, if you're not familiar with that. They have, is a company that takes all of their wares from people in Africa will make their things, and then this company sells them, and all the profits and proceeds goes back to them. So it's a really good company. The City Artist Gallery, I think that's just a bunch of different artists that come together. And
The
Yeah,
city
it's
has
actually
4 artists that live in
The artist off artists are going to be participating in a temporary a gallery downstairs where the art gallery, permanent art gallery will be, where it will be eventually. So
that's interesting. And then Crumpy's Bustin' Boards is a great event that's happening. Crumpy's has decided to have a make your own donut stand where you can actually go and make your own Crumpy's donuts with certain toppings. So that will be Saturday only, and it'll be right outside of Bustin' Boards, which is really exciting. What else? Misty Meadow Creamery, which you know is a great local ice cream shop. Knob Hall Winery will be coming along with Wiria, the olive oil and vinegar company, the Fine Arts Company, which sells and does a lot of things. They're going to have glass blowing, and they're also going to do sell like Zoe's chocolates and things like that. Gordon's Grocery, which is a huge, long-time staple in Washington County, they're going to come. Steamhook's Sourdough, which is a new bread company, they're going to be selling their bread along with the olive oil together. Let's see what else. The S Boutique, which is in Sagittarius. It's their little, accessory store, purses, things like that. They're coming. Jordan's bringing her stuff. We're also having a huge farmers market. I think, do they have the list of, there's how many?
yeah, on the back of what I handed out, there are a few of the vendors on the Artisans Market.
It's about 18, I think, altogether. So, and it's local farms like Ivy Hill, but then we also have kids-focused stands as well as our local artists.
We're going to have also Rough Fitness, who's going to do a lot of cycling demos. Dave's coming, Kathleen, Amanda, they're coming down and they've already sold out. It's already, and all of the proceeds that they have for that whole weekend, they're coming right back to Downtown Movement. So they're giving us all of their proceeds, which is wonderful. Structural Elements is a running fit. So if you're a big avid runner, you can go and get your sneakers fit. And they also do acupuncture, and then Limber Lama yoga. They're all going together. And so there's going to be yoga for those people that want to do that. And then we're also having an artisan market, which is just for crafts and people that have amazing artistry, that they're all going to be able to showcase that also as well. So a lot going on, and I'll pass that around also with our passport. So we're handing this out at Augustoberfest, and everybody will get a map to say where they're going, and if they go to every place, they get entered in a drawing to win some prizes. So you can take a look at that. So of course it's unfinished because we're still waiting for it.
This is going to be one piece.
One piece, right.
And are they going to get it right away? I mean,
Yes, when we first walk in, we had to talk to Charlie about that, but Charlie and Karen did say that they would hand it out for us, or we could have a stand handed. Yeah.
Okay.
What I love about this is that this was a completely private initiative. You are entrepreneurs and see the potential and the vision. You're young, and so, in my opinion, you're not as attached to what was in the past, but looking more towards what can be in the future. And I just wanted to ask you, what has been the most positive thing? I know you're still doing this, and it's not over yet, but what has been the most positive part of this experience for you?
I would say the community building has been huge, and that was, I think, one of our number one goals when we had this idea and started it. Just having a place where people can come together, people of different interests, and share resources and get excited about the place where we live. So I think that's been huge, and we've had so many, like an outpouring of just people who want to help, who want to volunteer, who want to be involved. It's people are just flooding in, and we're meeting so many people, and we have weekly meetings. So, we've been like cleaning up storefronts together and just brainstorming, and it's really built a nice community feeling.
What would you say is the biggest challenge that you've faced?
There's a lot of challenges, but I think, changing I think downtown has a perception that as a whole, it's a negative perception. The biggest challenge is changing that perception. And I don't think that we will fully get a positive feedback until people see this event and get that visual. Then once they get that visual, I do think that they're going to maybe start thinking in a different way in terms of the future and not what has happened in the past. That's at least my and our hope for it.
Yeah, it's just we're just trying to take a group of people that we already know are excited about seeing this visual and then let it spread and just be a small part of everything that you guys are already doing.
I think it will create a critical mass of whether it's minds that are changed or people who are interested in being an entrepreneur themselves, or maybe some of these businesses will decide to work with staff on finding a location downtown. I think it will be instrumental in changing minds. Well, now, what's been the biggest surprise for you in this process?
Well, first, I think we had heard things like it might be hard to work with the city. They might not let you do this. And it has been, I feel that as soon as we even mentioned it, we came in and had our first conversation, that you guys embraced us, you helped us. That's why we're shouting. We had so many of the same ideas. Amazing things that you guys already had in the works that we had no idea of at that point. And so that has been why we want to scream it from the rooftops, that you guys are just making things happen, that there's an administration right now that is hopefully going to make the change, make the turn. So that's our biggest, it was a surprise because we heard opposite and it was totally not what we expected, and we're so grateful for that.
Well, we're thankful to our dedicated staff. Let me just say one more thing. Well, go ahead, Marty.
Well, I was just going to do a name dropping for the second time this afternoon, but it relates to this exactly. And Councilman Metzner and I were taking the governor of Maryland, Governor O'Malley, up the street last week. And he remarked on what a heritage we had and how nice the buildings were, how good the urban setting looked. And frankly, we told him, we were very realistic. We said it's hard to fill those buildings, and we have all kinds of programs. In general, we told him, and we said it's still a tough road to hoe, as you all realize. But you know what he said? He said, well, if it doesn't work, he said, what's going to be your salvation? He said, young people. He said that himself. And you guys are a huge example of that, because I think it takes that generation. When I was your age, I lived in New York. I lived in Manhattan, so I know what Brooklyn was like.
Did they have electricity back then?
No,
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
They had old steam plants and stuff like that. But I know what Brooklyn looked like then, across the Williamsburg Bridge and all that stuff. But anyhow, but he said young people. So that's, and by the way, there are huge sections of New York that are now worth a fortune, and people were saying, what are we going to do with these buildings? You know, Soho and Tribeca. Tribeca was really falling apart in those days. Yeah.
It takes people with a vision and some commitment and wherewithal and creating partnerships, and I think that's what we have going.
Thank you.
I wanted to also recognize you because you were the group that did the chalkboard to generate ideas, like you talked about with community building. And also, I wanted you to just say how people can find out more about you, or how can they contact you. You want to share that?
Yeah, we have a website, downtownmovement.org, and a Facebook page, which has been huge, instrumental in getting the word out. That's really where we post most of our most recent up-to-date news. We have an email, thedowntownmovement@gmail.com.
Okay.
We have Instagram.
Instagram,
Yeah.
all right.
Instagram.
Downtown Movement.
Yes.
Yep.
Councilmember Alshire.
Sure. Just two things, both of which I've said before. The first is, I think all of us here are of a similar generation. I think all of us have kids of a similar age. Probably not as many, but and
That's a hard.
Maybe all together.
And
Maybe all together combined.
but I said this for the two wind down events. All of us are really from here and of a similar age, and we were told growing up that downtown was of a certain nature, and none of us embraced coming downtown for pretty much anything. So I think that this type of thing is going to be the thing where if we don't get our children to look at downtown differently, they're going to look at it like we were told to. That's that I think is important. And then the second point I'll make is the same point that I made during our deliberations on the stadium, and I'll just say it very frankly. it is not one big thing that will save downtown. It is a million little things. And I think that's the reason that you are seeing the success that you are for your endeavor, is that it will take a lot of these little things all over downtown to reinvigorate that life into downtown.
Anyone else?
I just want to say thank you. And it would have been easy for you all to sit back and say, let somebody else do it. Thank you for not saying, let somebody else do it.
And for inspiring so many other people
That means a lot.
to believe. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
I just want to thank you for making a decision to change your community. I guess it was a long time ago, some of us who may not be the same generation of you, but actually have children of the same generation of you. It was Kennedy that talked about doing for your community in his own words instead of asking your community to do for you, and you all are a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Keep up the great work. Yes. And if you're interested in serving on a board or commission for the city of Hagerstown, see our city clerk.
Do you want to talk about them, about the other events that we're going to do?
Please.
Well, we were just hoping that this first pop-up shop event is the first in a series. We wanted to have them go in conjunction with Hagerstown's biggest events, such as the Christmas tree lighting. We're thinking that would be great for the holiday shopping, and then the Blues Fest next spring. So that's what we're hoping.
And the more people see those packed streets and busy vendors, then I think it'll just reinforce that idea that it is possible and we can believe in it. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
It's our pleasure. All right, now to the harder stuff. Review of the Chapter 70 cable television and open video systems. We're going to have our attorney and Karen Giffen and Scott Nicewarner and Tom Robinson join us here at the table. I know, right?
I'm going to take the lead on this.
Please.
As you may recall, 3 or 4 months ago, we repealed a prior cable television and open systems ordinance that we had put in the code as Chapter 70. That was a fairly lengthy document, and the reason we repealed it was we enacted that prior to entering into the franchise the first time with Antietam Cable, and then we found that there were numerous inconsistencies between that ordinance and the agreement, the franchise agreement that was ultimately reached with Antietam Cable. And so all through the agreement we had to kind of say, except for or irrespective of what the ordinance says, we're doing something different. So we repealed that to avoid having those inconsistencies. But then after we did that, we, I guess, reconsidered a little bit and said, well, we still need to have some ordinance or provision in the code that says you must have a franchise to operate a cable system within the city of Hagerstown. And so this ordinance is much shorter. It's 6 pages long, and basically there are really only 2 parts to it. The first couple of sections simply say you must have a franchise to operate a cable system within the city of Hagerstown. You can't just come in and operate and ignore the city or not have an agreement with the city. And then the second part of it is kind of the procedures for entering into that franchise. Just basically what the application would have And we also made a provision for the payment of an application fee of a somewhat substantial amount, $25,000, simply because we have found that the cost to the city of negotiating these franchises and putting them together, that we need to have something to recoup some of that expense. Our consultants felt that $25,000 was a reasonable figure, an appropriate figure, and so we adopted that based on their recommendations. Although that would be something that, the council, as the entire ordinance, something that could be changed.
Is that a best practice to have an application fee? Is that typical in most communities?
Yeah, it is. If you had another provider that wanted to come in, it would create a fair amount of administrative expense, because one of the things you have to look at is their qualifications, technical, legal, financial, et cetera. And then also in then negotiating an agreement with them and having them file an initial application, there's a lot of level playing field things that you have to go through. So how would they provide PEG channels? How would they provide institutional network connectivity? What kinds of things would they provide?
So ensuring they have the capacity to actually do what they say they can do. And
exactly.
This is not exclusive, though.
No.
In other words, we would not just grant only one franchise, if there were different.
No, this is the ordinance, which is separate from the franchise agreement. And the franchise agreement is non-exclusive, as in 2.4 of what we're going to.
Also, if you look in section 5 of this ordinance, it says any franchise shall be.
I just wanted to put it out there. So
We understand that. That's one question we do get a lot.
Yeah, federal law actually doesn't allow you to grant an exclusive franchise. The key is, do you have other providers that want to come in?
Exactly. Mr. Munson.
Why 25,000? Why not 50,000 or 100,000?
It could be more, and I believe the ordinance allows you to adjust either up or down. Bill, correct me if I'm wrong on that, based on the actual expenses that you would incur.
Okay,
and so you
so
keep track of the
what
expenses.
you're really trying
it says
to get
in the
people
event
to-
costs exceed the application fee, the applicant shall pay the difference to the city within 30 days. Or conversely, if the costs are less than the application fee, the city shall refund the difference to the applicant.
Right, and it would be unlikely. I'll give you an experience. We helped Charles County negotiate their Verizon Fios franchise, and they had the same $25,000, and it ended up costing close to triple that by the time it was all said and done. The county just documented those expenses. By the time Verizon also spent a fair amount of money, sort of legal fees and those kinds of things. So they realized that what they were asking for as far as a franchise was significantly more complicated and sophisticated than that base $25,000 fee allowed for. And so the county documented all those expenses, and Verizon paid the $75,000.
I'm sure that's not going to put a dent in their bottom line.
Not for most cable providers. You are correct.
Any other questions or comments off the bat?
On the whole subject, or are we on the whole subject?
Yeah, well.
We're on the cable ordinance.
Cable ordinance.
Yeah, just
Well, I
chapter
know
70.
that, the whole subject of the cable ordinance.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Well, in other words, we're not talking about the specific
Franchise
Not the franchise,
agreement.
yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll wait.
Okay.
If you're okay with this, we'd introduce it next week.
Is everyone okay with it? All right. Thank you. The next item is along the same lines, but the Hagerstown cable TV related franchise renewal.
And Mayor and Council, what you have in your packet is the agreement that we worked with the negotiation team. It was Scott, Bill, Tom, Bob Dushin, and myself. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that Brian Lynch is in the room as well, and we negotiated in good faith with each other. They were good negotiations. We have reached agreement with all our major issues. We believe this is a good document for the city of Hagerstown and its citizens. And with that, we would like to go over the highlights of the agreement and then answer any questions that you have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom to start some of the highlights.
Okay, all right, thank you, Karen. I thought I'd start by just going back over the process. As you may recall, it's been about over a year and a half, I think, early 2013 when the process actually started, which was a lot of fact-finding. It was the needs assessment. We did residential surveys, a lot of public input, did organizational focus groups, technical and financial audits, and then prepared documents that were, I don't know how many pages it came to, but it was 7. A lot. Then transmitted that over to the company so the company could read the documentation and then began the negotiations. And that occurred over a period of a number of months.
Audits and reviews.
Correct. So it was a very thorough process and really designed to flesh out what the needs would be and to project those over a period of time of 10, 12 years or longer. So the initial document that was proposed and sent over to Antietam was then negotiated back and forth over a number of months. And what I wanted to do is just touch on a number of provisions. I think these were outlined in your packet, and we can talk about them as we go through them with any questions you have. The definition of cable service gross revenues is really important because it's what the franchise fees are based upon. So you get 5% under federal law, and that continues under sections 3.1 and 3.2. And they're paid quarterly, but 5% of what? And so what we were able to do is modernize and clarify some provisions. So it's still a very broad definition of gross revenues, fairly consistent with what you have now, but again, looking at clarifying and making sure that each and every piece was understood. We determined that during the franchise fee audit, that there were some things, some adjustments that needed to be made in the language.
And it was also regarding cable services.
Well, and that's correct. There's been some changes in the federal law over a period of time, changes in case law, and it was very important to make sure that it focused on cable services because the company provides a number of different other types of services too. Cable modem, internet services, which are information services classified under federal law, so they're not part of the franchise fee equation, and then also telephone service. So it really focuses on cable services. The next piece was the term, and most franchise terms, talking about best practices, are in that 10 to 12 year range, and we ended up settling on 12 years, and a lot of that was due to the benefits that were negotiated in the franchise, and we'll talk about some of those later, and making sure that those were preserved for a period of time. Because one of the things you look at are changes in law. You tend to have things grandfathered, and wanted to make sure that the franchise covered those things for a period of time that would enable them to continue to be provided. 2.4, which isn't listed in there, that's the non-exclusivity provision, and again, that's under federal law. And then Section 2.6, that was heavily negotiated.
We all remember 2.3.
Right. That has a lot more detail than the prior competitive equity provision. And essentially what it requires is that that if another operator were to come in and provide service, that they would compete fairly with each other. And so essentially what it enables is providing franchise terms that are equivalent, similar, providing service to residents that is equivalent and similar, those kinds of things.
There was some language in the current, but this is more detailed.
Oh, yeah, significantly more detailed. One of the things that has happened, and you guys have probably seen it in other areas, not in Maryland so far, but the state will sometimes come in and prescribe state franchising requirements. Sometimes those will differ from local franchising requirements. And so this does have a provision that would require and enable the city and Antietam to negotiate changes in the franchise if another provider came in with terms that were less burdensome or more favorable, not based on the city's ordinances, because the city would really be looking for equivalent terms, but based on what the state may do. Now again, the state of Maryland hasn't indicated its desire to pursue that course of action. And mostly it was entities like Verizon that were pushing that. Verizon now has all the FiOS franchises it can handle. And so I don't think it'll be pursuing more anytime soon. But if that were to happen, then it would require a negotiation process. The city and Antietam would try to come to some agreement. If they couldn't, it does enable Antietam to seek relief, and they would have that right under federal law anyway, to seek relief in the federal court system, or it does allow them to terminate the franchise, not within the first 4 years. They would have to give 2 years notice. So the earliest that could happen would be 6 years into the new franchise term, so halfway through the franchise. Again, the likelihood that something like that would happen is low, but if it does, right, it does provide, again, some competitive equity. The other key here is that's not just a change in the law. Another provider would actually have to be in the city and providing service for that to kick into effect. So it would have to be a competitive environment.
Comparable services.
Incomparable services, that's correct, thank you. Competition is not necessarily bad, so it's kind of a balancing act, and we think we've reached a really good balance in making sure that competition is enabled if it would occur, and that it would be fair if it happened. Okay, let's see, we already talked about 3.1 and 3.2, and that's just continuing the quarterly payments of the 5%.
And it's approximately $408,000 a year.
Currently.
Yep, currently.
And that would continue as long as Antietam subscribership and revenue per subscriber continued.
And that does go into our general fund, so that there's two different funding revenues. This is our general fund portion.
Is that based on their self-reporting, or do we look at an audit or something like that?
During this process, an audit was done, and there were some things that were determined, but they were small and minor things that were inconsistent, and those were, we reached
small,
agreement.
about
and
4,800 maybe through everything.
But we apply this every quarter, this 5%.
Right.
That's what I meant was that it goes against some number.
Yeah, they send
Where
us
does that number come from?
Right, the number is reported by them. They report the gross revenues and then the 5% of that. And you do have audit rights on that. In fact, you could do that at any time that you wanted.
Okay.
So it was done during this process. We would recommend, the state gives you the ability to look back 3 years. We would recommend that you at least do it halfway through the franchise, but you may want to do it more often than that. There's some franchising authorities that do it, every 3 to 5 years. Yeah.
And the audit rights is the next section. We have.
Right.
And that would represent savings. If you do it for 3 years, you can combine it into one.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Okay, so we talked about the audit rights. That's in 3.6. Then 4.4, the prior franchise had the ability to do 2 performance reviews during the 12-year period, years 4 and 8. I don't believe that the city did those, and the more current best practice is to do it halfway through the term. By then you'll certainly know what's occurring and the state of technology and those kinds of things, and that's really what the midterm review is for, is to look at the franchise, look at how things have been occurring. Is the company keeping up with technology? What have been the issues that consumers might have encountered, those kinds of things. And then it allows, since it's a performance evaluation session, it allows the city to, if there have been some issues, to take some actions related to that. Not that you don't have the ability to do that at any time, because there's a number of different enforcement mechanisms in here, and we'll talk about those. Okay, the mandatory insurance requirements, again, levels consistent with a system this size as far as commercial general liability and those kinds of things. One thing we would recommend is at the start of the new franchise, most Most providers at the beginning of the franchise will provide the policy, a copy of the actual policy, and then you get insurance certification after that every 6 months or annually, depending on how the policy is written. And I would recommend, if you haven't looked at the policy in a long time, is to make sure that at the beginning of the new franchise you do get a full copy of the policy.
And we're making a maintenance list, a maintenance tick list, as I guess you would call, where we're making a list of everything that we would do as it's enacted, and then also as we go through. So the performance evaluation obviously would be in there. Are we getting the reports? Are we looking at them? So we're making like a little tickler list just to maintain the franchise agreement.
Right, and that's a very good point. Most franchising authorities do that. They put together a matrix, and then it will have dates by which things occur, and that gives you the ability to sort of keep track of all the things that you can be doing and that would be beneficial to do. Continuation of the letter of credit requirement. It's a $10,000 requirement unless the transfer occurs, and then it can be increased to $50,000. What it essentially does is it's better than a surety bond, and so we were glad that we could continue that requirement because it gives you immediately accessible cash in the case of any kind of non-performance for which you haven't been able to get satisfaction through the traditional measures in the franchise. And it's replenished. If it's a problem and you have to exercise it, then it's replenished. And that could be for anything: non-payment of fees, issues where you've issued violations and they're monetary and you haven't gotten those from the company. It's important, I think, to mention at this point that there was that requirement in the past franchise and you've never had to exercise it. So we're not saying that these things are things that you would imminently have to take advantage of. They just give the city a significant amount of leverage and capability and enforcement authority if you need it. But overall, the prior franchise with Antietam has been a very successful one in the terms of of not encountering the kinds of issues that some other franchising authorities and franchisees encounter. Okay, customer service standards. Now they're in Exhibit A. There's about 8 pages of them. They are more stringent than the FCC's requirements and guidelines, and they've continued and does give the city a number of different abilities to ensure that there is compliance with those. Including at the end related to complaints that you would receive and resolution of those complaints and those kinds of things. And then when we get to liquidated damages, you have per monetary penalties per day that you can place if the company's non-compliant. So it's a really good framework. It continues to be more stringent than a lot of franchising authorities have. And the key is when you get a complaint is just to go through those processes and make sure that they are satisfied. Yeah.
Yeah. My question, my first question. My question relates to the billing credits and refunds on A5. And maybe it's somewhere else, but it gives times to pay bills and what actions may be taken and so forth under number 6.
Right.
Okay. The question I had was late fees for late. I didn't see that here. Is it in the agreement? Do we have any control, or are we proposing any control over the amount or percent of late fees that can be charged?
I don't believe there's anything in the customer service standards that does that. It leaves it up to the company to charge what would be a usual and customary late fee. Has there been an issue with it here?
I'm not aware of an issue, but I'm just thinking of safety. I mean, if they decided to impose, like companies do sometimes, credit card companies charge, to my view, onerous fees, we have no recourse to control that. At least I don't see it here. I would be interested in, and I don't know what the answer is, and I don't have an objection to late fees. I think they're necessary.
Right.
I do get a little bit of heartburn about 2 weeks. To me, it ought to be, the customer, receives the bill no later than 15 days before, because that's another problem I have with these companies. I don't have it personally,
Right.
but I see that anybody that might set this, sometimes you get them a week and a half. And I'm not saying Antietam Cable does it. I just think, that it ought to be arriving at the customer's place of residence or business within 15 days. I don't know how you do that, but they tell you, they'll tell you should mail it out 7 to 10 days before,
Right.
which is very, very generous. And sometimes they don't come. Again, I don't know about Antietam. I'm not accusing them.
Right.
But other companies will sometimes, you'll get it within that 10 days. So they're violating their own thing. So that's my concern, and also that there be some control over the amount or of the late fee. And I don't know what that is, but that's an area that could be abused, if you ask me.
Right. I don't disagree with you, and that has been a problem.
And again, I don't object to having late fees. It's just when they're unrealistic or onerous.
Yeah, I think that there's nothing in here, because we didn't see it as a problem referenced in the residential surveys. You're correct. I mean, it could be a potential issue. Again, we didn't see it as an issue that had occurred. And some other companies have had problems with late fees. I mean, in some cases, although local franchising authorities don't step in some cases the state may step in if they believe that the fees are inconsistent with what would be considered normal practice.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it would be a fee that's not consistent with what the administrative cost
Right.
is.
Well, I'd be interested in something that controls that. I don't know if the rest of the council is.
I think we could look at it. Again, we didn't in this particular case, but we certainly could and see what could be placed in there. Again, I don't think we put it in here because we didn't see it as an issue that came out of.
Well, again, I'm not saying it's a current issue, but we're talking about a 12-year agreement here. I mean, looking for revenue, looking for whatever, what if they said, there's a $40 flat fee, and then
right,
you pay,
then it would be considered
well, but
onerous.
we don't have a recourse if they said there's a $30 flat fee or 40, do we?
I don't know that they would. I don't know that there's anything, because we don't have any
Well,
rate
again,
control.
I'm not saying they're going to.
Right.
I'm just saying, what if management decided to do that?
Yeah.
Where would we be?
Well, yeah. Let us take a look at it. If it's something that needs to be placed in here, I'm certain that we could look into that with Antietam and see. Bill, I don't know what your discussions or experience had been, when you and Bob were going over some of these things, whether late fees came up. I don't recall. No. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, yeah. Let us take a look at that. Yeah.
Just put a reasonable cap or reasonable control of some kind. Slightly unreasonable. Probably could live with that.
Okay. Reasonable is the fee. Yeah, then we can absolutely do that. Okay, all right. Let's see. Okay, anything else on the customer service standards? That we're in there? Okay. All right, so the next piece we wanted to highlight was the PEG fees. And PEG requirements, public educational and governmental access channels. And the first one right up front was the PEG fee. The city currently gets a PEG fee of 60 cents per month per subscriber. That is a pass-through to subscribers. And we knew that from the needs assessment that needed to be increased. And so what we were able to negotiate, and kind of looking at what the real requirements were, we had ended up, if you recall in the needs assessment, looking at priority 1 requirements,
Right.
priority 2, priority 3, yeah.
For the channels, both the access channels that are being utilized now
right.
in all 3 agencies.
And had determined that if we could reach 70 cents per month per subscriber, it would be beneficial to us, and to the BOE and to HCC. So that's what we negotiated, is that for the first 2 years of the 12-year deal, it would continue at 60 cents per month per subscriber, and it would go to 70 cents thereafter. So we believe that will meet the requirements based on what it would generate over a period of time.
And putting that to dollars, 60 cents is about $235,000 a year. Going to 70 cents, it's about 274. We estimated.
Right.
We did an algebraic form. I did for that amount.
Yeah, and it's notable that the fee over the last several years that the city has accrued that and has gone out for bid to replace the equipment in the council chambers and in the control room, and is now evaluating those bids. And that actually, when we get there, we'll talk about it, that actually brings you into the high definition television world.
I guess in the current agreement, the one where that's how you got your initial equipment. That's how you got the
that's a good
maintenance,
point.
so.
Right. So that fee is really critical to being able to do productions like this.
And we are asked on the 9.7 about public access, and I think this is an important part to go through. If you that there are some, we can call upon a public access channel, but there is people have to have a detailed plan, an operating plan, and a capacity plan.
In other words, you can't just come in off the street and say, hey, I want access to public TV cameras or
Right.
Right, yeah, and that, we spent a lot of time with Antietam going over that particular provision. That's the one in 9.7. 9.7, let me refer you specifically to it, 9.7B. And so we continue the educational channel shared by HCC and BOE. Continue the city government channel and enable capacity for a public/community access channel. But under 9.7b, for anyone to activate that channel, they would have to come in with a very detailed channel development plan. That plan, for instance, would have to include the nature and type of local and other programming of local interest that the provider would produce or facilitate, how the channel operations would be developed, how they'd be sustained over the long term, a business plan stating funding requirements and sources for supporting necessary public community access facilities, equipment, staffing, other pertinent operational elements, and then knowing that the plan would need to have some fruition, it would also describe how the provider would be able to produce and distribute over the channel an average of 5 hours per week of locally produced, original, non-repetitive, non-text generated video programming in the first 6 months, 10 hours per week within the next year, and 15 hours per week within the next 2 years. Those are reasonable requirements of a very well thought out plan.
What is a non-character generated?
Your character generated is your slideshow,
Right,
I guess,
slideshow.
on the channel.
Gotcha.
So it's actually video programming.
Actually video programming, right. Could be talk shows, coverage of community events.
Not slideshows with music.
Which anybody could do.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
Right. And if you think about what people want to view and what would be of interest to people, people do love local programming. You find that it's very well viewed in places where you have a solid public access organization, and it's usually well put together, so it's not only reflective of the community, but reflective of the diversity of the community, and that's really important. This really lays that out, that someone would have to come in with a very detailed and comprehensive plan you would get to review and approve it.
So we wouldn't have Wayne's World, someone filming something in their basement, coming in and
Not unless you approve
wanting
that.
to put it on air.
And even if you approve that, they'd have to come up with 5 hours per week of new stuff, all the operational support.
Somebody can't come in for one program. They've got to develop a system and a programming to...
And how they'll continually operate.
Right, they'd have to be pretty well heeled, and we did have a really interesting focus group with members of the business and nonprofit community who thought there would be significant interest in really good programming, and that's actually reflected in the needs assessment. We talk about what that would be, and for a group to do it, they're going to have to come in with some resources, clearly be able to enable and facilitate that. They would have to come in and wow you, in other words, and say this would be like the Hagerstown Community Channel. Okay, so that's 9.7. 9.8. All right, so this is really, again, reflective of some very significant and hard negotiations. There are cable operators really resisting bringing local channels, local PEG channels into the high definition world, but that's where everything is going. The majority of people now have high definition televisions and have high definition tiers that they purchase from the cable provider, and that's where most of their viewing is. And these are all studies are indicating that it continues to ramp up. Some folks don't even go to the SD tiers anymore. That's where you are right now, is on the SD tier. So it's really important that you have the ability to migrate into the high definition world. Plus all the equipment is going there. You can't buy a standard definition video camera anymore. You can't buy a standard definition television. We negotiated that with Antietam. There are some triggers. You have to be able to produce and distribute and send the programming in high definition. And once you do that, then Antietam, you could make the request to Antietam. You would have to be providing a certain amount of programming in high definition, which of course, if you're producing everything in high definition, you would. And the city is in really good shape on this because they produce a lot of original local programming. All these public meetings, add up to a significant amount of so we basically sized those hours, and Antietam agreed based on what you're currently doing, but it would be in high definition, and then you'd be able to gain access to the HD tier, and that'll be really important. HCC and BOE would also be able to do that if they come into the same sort of realm, so they would have to produce more programming than they currently produce. Another one that I think again is really a testimony to the hard negotiations we did and the agreements we were able to reach is a lot of cable operators aren't providing video on demand capacity to, this is cable-based PEG video on demand, to PEG channels, and we were able to negotiate that. 3 hours per month during years 1 to 6, 5 hours per month thereafter. Doesn't sound like a lot, but actually when you think about the way people view video on demand, they don't view a lot of long-form programs unless they're like network shows that might be a half hour or hour. They're really viewing more short-form programs, much like they would watch on YouTube.
And you can refresh that every 30 days.
Every 30 days, right. So literally you could have programs on government initiatives and services. You could take, instead of entire council meetings, you could take specific provisions that you want people to see over that 30-day period and want to make sure that they're up there. Say, for instance, the discussion you just had on the downtown movement, yeah, and you want people to be aware of that. That's probably was what, maybe 7 or 8 minutes, right? So you can do those kinds of things. So we think that's going to be really beneficial because that will complement what they call linear video now, which is real-time video.
Although not to say that our entire meetings are not thought-provokingly interesting.
I would say that's
right. And then one of the things that's going to occur is after the council chambers and the council control room are upgraded, the next thing on Karen's list is a brand new playback server, which would be an HD playback server and would also give you the ability to do real-time streaming and streaming on demand online. So now if you've got video on demand on the cable system, you've got HD and SD capacity on the cable system, you've got really your HD online as well, both streaming and on demand. You've literally got every form of electronic communication that people would need to be able to get at what you're trying to provide to them. Because the internet-based stuff will go on the short, or not the short, the small form platforms like smartphones and those kinds of things. Okay. Let's see. The electronic program guide. That was another thing that we really wanted to make sure happened. A lot of times, and I think even now, on Antietam's electronic program guide, it'll just say city government programming or city channel. This allows you to take detailed listings on both the linear video, which would describe for instance, not only this work session today, but the items that are being covered, and also allow you on the on-demand programming to have the detailed listing. You know how you go in and you get kind of the short piece and then you hit info and it goes deeper into it. This allows Karen and her folks to work with Antietam, and they have a third-party program information provider to send all that metadata to them.
So we're allowed to work with a third party.
Right.
And maybe through Antietam Cable, but that gives us the right to do that.
Right, yeah.
So in other words, if you divided the programs into time blocks,
Right.
you'd be able to click on that time block and you gave it an enticing title.
Right.
Instead of boring meeting, saying,
It would say-
whatever,
it would
exciting
say-
meeting or something. But no, but then that would allow that to go up to the information block like you do for other.
Right.
just
And
like for a normal.
then, just like any
Okay.
other electronic program guide, once it's highlighted, you click on it and you're there, which is great. So that I think will be really helpful in people navigating and getting to the information. Okay, all right, so that's the PEG highlights, now the INET highlights. And what we essentially were able to do is continue the provision of the institutional network, both the fiber-based and the cable modem-based, but do some new things with it. For example, you currently have a number of fire stations and a number of community buildings, centers operated by HHA that have Antietam's cable modem service but are paying for that service. This converts them to a non-charged account, which becomes part of the institutional
If you
network.
look at Exhibit D,
Yeah.
that has the places on it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, actually, Exhibit C.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, Exhibit D is, we'll get to that one. That's the
Okay.
free cable
Okay.
service. So if you look at Exhibit C,
C.
and you look at the second and third pages, all those locations will continue to get cable modem service, continue to be able to get access to the internet, but now be provided with that service at no charge. And I think that's a really important point. It gives them access to the internet, access to the kinds of things they need for their operations. In the case of the pump stations, access to being provided or providing data back into the city's network, and all of that will be, again, at no charge. On the first page, these are locations that some of them will continue to be connected via fiber, again, at no charge. They are already connected. And others can be connected through agreements to be entered into between the city. Scott and his counterparts over at Antietam will look at designs and those kind of things. Those would be constructed by Antietam, either using existing fiber if it was there or overlashing new fiber, but the cost for that could come out of the PEG fee. Could be funded by that. So it allows, again, kind of a building on what was done previously with both the fiber and the cable modem INET. Okay. Let's see. And then what Karen was referring to, Exhibit D, complementing basic and expanded basic service at specified locations. What we did is we came up with a list of locations in Exhibit D. Some of them already get cable service for, again, at no charge. And some of them are brand new, not brand new facilities, but they would be facilities that would be brand new to the free service. Yeah. And so the service will now be provided to all those locations without charge.
I see the circuit court is listed, but not the district court. Is there a reason for that? Or?
I don't think there was any planned reason for it. The circuit court was already connected. I believe, and I'd have to go back and look at the way it's constructed, but the city can request additional sites.
I was just curious.
That are,
I just noticed.
I don't know.
No, historic. The circuit court was connected, but
Right.
the district court hasn't been. So.
Yeah, and I believe in 13.2 it gives you the ability to work with Antietam to provide service to additional public locations.
So in the chart on front, it says based on annexation. That's not hopefully that's not a qualifier.
Oh, okay. No, that's back on the INET section.
Right.
Okay.
That's only as far as fiber.
Fiber
connectivity
go.
we
Okay.
go.
Right.
I gotcha.
Right. In other words, what happens is the city's franchise only covers the city boundaries, but we wanted to make sure that the fiber could be extended to new city facilities in annexation that may be part of the county right now.
Right.
But, yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we can look into the district court, I think.
It was important, especially on the fiber side, as it involved, you'll notice that there's connections there to Hager House, and the fairgrounds with the potential to
maybe provide more interactive opportunities, especially like Hager House, as far as historical displays and items like that would go, to provide a little bit more modern type interactive tools that could be developed, whether it be through internet displays or
those QR codes
programming,
and everything.
those kind of things. Yeah, interactive, kind of like what you see at a museum, where you can have a display screen and you want to learn more about Jonathan Hager or Little High School. You press a button and it provides you that. Yeah. So that was one of the important things, and we look forward to partnering with Antietam to be able to do some of those, look into those projects in the future.
Okay, and last but not least, and again, you've had provisions like this in the prior franchise and haven't had to exercise them, but liquidated damages are one ability for the city to make sure that things do get enforced if there are problems. And these are significant monetary penalties for a variety of different categories. And again, you haven't had to use them in the past, but it's really important to have them in the franchise, like any enforcement mechanism, to be able to use it if you need to do it. And they are significant, and Antietam agreed to these levels of penalties. There is a cap on them, and you'll notice that it can't be more than $25,000 per year. That we felt was reasonable, again, given the past practices of Antietam, and then looking at how quickly they would accrue if there was an issue, which again would be for any company. But certainly a company like Antietam, that isn't a Comcast and doesn't have a ton of cable properties around the country, those kinds of dollars per day would be significant. They would move them to resolve an issue if it came to that. And again, it hasn't in the past, and we don't expect it to in the future, but it does give the city, significant capability if it does, yeah. So I think those are the highlights of the franchise document. Again, you can see it's pretty lengthy. It reflects the lengthiness of the negotiations and the number of different issues and provisions that are covered and all the things that came out of the needs assessment and the audits.
So if we have any questions on the agreement, and then we'll go through the process.
Go for it. I want to just, first of all, thank you for all this work, because this is pretty detailed and complex, and that's why it's taken so long to achieve, but it really is good work, and I think it's a good thing for the city. Anyone else have comments or questions? Mr. Munson.
Scott, there is, as I understand it, there is nothing in this proposal that would not allow the city to provide some broadband and high-speed.
Well, under this
cable.
franchise, we can't include that as part of this franchise. This is a cable services franchise.
Okay.
So which is basically excludes any type of broadband restrictions to be included.
But
so
there's no restrictions.
There's no restrictions. No
restrictions,
restrictions
okay.
on the city.
If the city were to provide cable service, then it would have to do so consistent with the competitive equity provisions, but I don't know
we're not
if the
going
city
to do
wants
that.
to get in that business.
Probably not.
Any other questions or feedback?
No, I'd appreciate it if you'd look into that.
Right, the late fee. Yeah,
Once again, late fees themselves, it's just, like you said, you want to have things there like the liquidated damages in case they become necessary. That's what I'm talking about.
So late fee, and then also, was it
The district court, right, we're looking at the district court, yeah.
Bill, do you want to go through the process, if that's okay,
Next
of
steps.
where we go from here?
What our plan is at next week's meeting to introduce the ordinance to enter into this, authorize the entry into this agreement with. At next week's meeting, we want to introduce the ordinance to authorize the city to enter into the agreement. Also at next week's meeting, we are having a public hearing because that's
Part of the
part of the FCC requirements. So we will have a public hearing to receive any input that the public might have on it, keeping in mind that we've already gone through a needs assessment, so the public has already
Had some input.
Had some input and an opportunity to indicate, what issues or additional services they might require, but not to prevent them from doing that at this hearing, but that really was done some time ago. So we would have that public hearing first. If the council was still comfortable after taking those comments to introduce it, we would introduce it this month, actually enact it at the September meeting, which I understand is
You mean adopt it?
Adopt it,
At
I'm
the
sorry.
September meeting, and then it would be enacted 30 days later?
Right, it would become effective at the end of October. And we have an extension on the existing agreement until December the 1st, so we have a little leeway there if we didn't stick strictly to that time schedule. But that's...
I don't anticipate there will be major hangups.
Well, and it's also important to note too that in the very, very, very few issues that we've gotten from the public on customer service or issues with Antietam Cable, this is a city franchise. So city residents would be the ones that would be at the public hearing, not
anyone who has
county,
a complaint.
not county.
And also the, how to, if you have a problem, how to make a complaint, it would be for city residents.
Right, right.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks again. Good work.
There are a lot of aspects to this, and we do have a good team. Karen, Scott, Tom, Bill, Bob Duchin. I mean, it's been a nice, strong team. It's taken time, as you're aware, but we've got a lot of issues that we worked on. We've got a lot of talent that worked on it as our team. And I think we do want to acknowledge Brian Lynch again from Antietam Cable, a local business representative and member of our community, and want to acknowledge Brian again.
Yeah, and I would say the same from my perspective, because we negotiate these all over the country, and you have an excellent team here. And I remember a lot of us, even when we're on vacation, emailing back and forth because an issue was critical during that period of time. And so, again, I want to thank the city for their involvement and expertise.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 6 on our agenda is the Community City Center Plan implementation. This is number 8, Neighborhood Support Strategy, Vacant Structures Program.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
Pull that mic nice and close.
I certainly will, sir. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. First, I'd like to take a moment to introduce Mr. Jason Morton. Mr. Morton has worked with city staff. He is from John Salvatore's office, and he has been working with Mr. Boyer to provide legal services to the city, and it was his services that assisted us in getting here tonight with the vacant structure amendments. As the memo kind of walks us through, one of the things identified in the city center plan talked about more support for our neighborhoods. And in particular, the plan cites both incentive programs and code enforcement. And as we indicated in the memo, we have incentive programs geared towards vacant structures. This council enacted some programs, down payment assistance programs that also include funds for repairs to properties if someone's buying a property that's been vacant for a period of time. And I believe we have settled on 7 homes since that program was enacted, where we had provided grants of $7,500 per home. Plus we have the PEP program We have our various loan programs. We have our first third programs, all of which vacant and underutilized buildings typically, dependent on the development plan, would be able to at least apply for those programs. The ordinance also spells out, I think, pretty clearly that staff have heard from you and from our community that vacant structures are causing problems throughout our city. And I indicated in the memo, or we indicated in the memo, that we're seeing the problem everywhere, whether on the terrace or on the north end, the south end, in the downtown. Vacant structures average right around 1,200 in some vacant structures. And we have 2 vacant structure ordinances. But I think it's important to differentiate between having a vacant structure ordinance and a vacant structure program. Our vacant structure ordinances, I think, and we indicated in the memo, provide a basic structure for a plan to move forward. But the difference between having an ordinance and a program is having the resources to actually enforce the ordinances. And we also, when we first tackled this with the mayor and council several years ago, I believe it was in 2007, shortly after the ordinances were passed, the housing bubble broke. And there was a lot of concern expressed to the body at the time about the housing bubble breaking, not being able to move properties sitting on the market for an extended period. And for a whole host of reasons, the staff were directed to not be as aggressive in bringing properties into the fold, if you will, into the program. Conditions have changed. As we indicated in the memo, our research indicates that most properties are staying on the market under 4 months, so 100 and some days at the max on the residential side. But we are seeing the problem of vacant structures, and what we're proposing tonight are a series of amendments to the existing ordinances. And if we look at the second page of the memo, and we concentrate on what the proposed revisions are trying to do, or trying to arrest and address. The unmonitored vacant structures are causing blight and deterioration, but there's a real component here for our first responders, people going into these structures when they're dispatched for either fires, or if they're dispatched for the nuisance crimes, the break-ins, the copper thieves, all things that then reduce the assessable base. And that's what really comes into play here, is protecting our neighborhoods and our property values. We've done a lot of research. We've read about ordinances across the country. Our fees that we're proposing here are not the highest by any stretch. But our research indicates that you have to be careful in establishing your fee structure, because you will have some property owners where if you're charging too much, they may develop a low-end use for a property just to get out of the program. And so it's a balancing act. So the fees that we're proposing tonight, we believe, are appropriate to provide the necessary resources to have a vacant structure program. And we can get into the details of what the amendments are. But I think another important component in this, in addition to the fees and that, is this will allow us to respond quickly to address the blight. And that's something that I think it's to the heart of what we're trying to do here. It's identifying properties, it's addressing blight more quickly by having the appropriate staff, and having additional standards through the principles of community policing through environmental design. Vacant structures are an attractive nuisance. That's something that we're experiencing, and by requiring additional locks, types of locks, dusk to dawn lighting, that has to be present, not only for law enforcement patrolling the area, but for neighbors to be able to see what's going on at the neighboring property. And for all those reasons, we're proposing these basic changes to the ordinances. And we can walk through the two ordinances. We're trying to make them as parallel as possible in our definitions in that. Our two ordinances currently, one is a residential, the other's titled commercial. And we're going to talk about how we're suggesting that be retitled as non-residential, so it's more clear. On the residential side, other than a fee change and the SEPTED changes, the primary change is the definition. When would a property be included in this program? And right now, the ordinance says a year. And what we are recommending is 4 months, or if the property's in foreclosure, if the property is blight, if it's causing blight in the community, those properties would come in immediately.
And the other one is if it's posted as uninhabitable.
Oh, if it's
which
posted
would be
as
by the
uninhabitable.
city, right?
Yes.
The city would make that determination.
Yes. So it would be designed, or it is designed, to go after the ones that are causing the most problems the most quickly. And we would apply that same standard to the non-residential properties. That's the mixed use, the commercials, and that sort of thing. We would, through our research, be able to place liens against these properties for unpaid fees. So that helps with our revenue source to be able to have the resources to have a vacant structure program. I talked a little bit already about the community policing through environmental design, and
You mean crime prevention through environmental design?
I do, yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
It's all right.
Crime prevention through environmental design, which ties into community policing.
It is part of community policing.
Yes, but it is crime prevention through environmental design. And we're not talking about a full-scale program there, but just a few specifics where you got to keep your shrubs cut down so someone going by can see what's happening at the property, make for easier monitoring. And the lighting, again, would be the other big one. On the commercial side, we're saying mirror what we're doing on the residential. So non-residential and residential would be the same, except for the fee structure. And larger buildings, not all commercial buildings are larger, but they typically are. And they take more time and more resources. And they tend to stay vacant more for a longer period of time.
Part of this is also requiring insurance liability coverage.
Yes, and I wanted to get there.
I'm sorry, jumping ahead.
I want to get there as talking about both of them with the insurance requirement. On that, we have seen programs across the country requiring insurance. There's no guarantee that having insurance means that if something happens at the property, if there's a fire like what had happened at the building on West Antietam Street, there's no guarantee that those funds would be available. But it's better than not having insurance. At least there's an opportunity for funds to be available. And right now, vacant properties that fall into disrepair, have fires like what happened on West Antietam, the city becomes stuck because there wasn't any insurance to handle that. and we've expended a lot of public funds for that type of situation.
We could probably use that property as an example for so many of the changes that were, like the 30-mile radius, some point of contact is also
Yes.
a part of this as well.
And-
I'm jumping ahead. I'm just.
Nope, and
we're a little behind, so I'm trying to speed
right.
things up. Sorry, John.
Well, and that's the next thing. For both residential and non-residential, staff believe it's appropriate to have someone who's able to respond. Maryland state law requires that if someone has an LLC, that they have to have a resident agent in the state. Oftentimes, it's an attorney's office. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have someone who's responsible for a property who can respond. We believe it's reasonable and prudent if someone is going to leave their property vacant, that they designate someone who can respond in a reasonable period of time, and a 30-mile radius is a reasonable distance should there be an incident at the property. And again, it gets back to the types of things that happen at vacant structures. And so that's kind of the higher level overview and some of the mechanics. And so I guess right now I would like to ask if you have questions about what it is that we're trying to do, and then we can kind of walk through the ordinances.
Go ahead.
I guess first and foremost, I support the concept. I think it speaks to this issue that we're not singling out any one type of property. We're singling out properties that are either occupied or operated in an irresponsible manner. I see this as part of that process, the process that citizens have, I think, demanded of us to address through these actions. I don't know, at least for the last 2 years I've been sitting here. But I think that in this case, some of the items that you have provided, with due respect, I think swing a little bit too far on that pendulum in terms of regulating property. And I say that in the vein of the one comment that you make in here, which is that the goal of this is to identify and abate blight quickly, deter vandalism, and sort of the theme that's used throughout this, which I think is a good theme, is that you're trying to address what is a condition in a relatively timely fashion, so that it doesn't beget those other things that sort of escalate over a long period of time. In that context, I really don't care if someone is available within 30 miles as much as I do care that somebody is available. In other words, you have a contact you can contact that is able to respond and take some responsibility in that response, in that communication, in a timely fashion. Do they have to live within 30 miles? No. I mean, if somebody that lived in Ocean City that got here, 4 hours later, I just don't I don't see distance as the key to the goal of timely response. I think for me, that's the key. While I generally support the idea of the crime prevention through environmental design, I don't like assigning regulatory process to undefined principles. I see them sort of loosely identified in here, but I'm not comfortable with measuring the height of somebody's bushes in front of their windows and doors. I just don't.
Well, this isn't
think
somebody's. It's a vacant structure.
Well, somebody owns it, and I'm not. I don't see that as being sort of, one of the pieces or epicenters of irresponsible conduct, if you will. again, if you can't define those items more clearly, if they don't fit within that, more structured regulatory framework, the way that, actual code issues do, I'm not comfortable.
Are you saying you would prefer to
sending
see
staff out there?
SEPTED in the definitions, like what that actually means?
I didn't read in here where SEPTED was specifically defined. In other words, I can't go to that and say, let's take an electrical issue. An electrical inspector can go into a home, and there are a specific set of industry-regulated codes in which that electrical system should be established. I didn't read that in that set of principles.
Well, actually, what I read was it says these additional requirements are minimal door entry lighting from dusk to dawn. That's one. Prescribed locking requirements for doors and windows. That's two. And then pruning requirements for shrubbery and trees. So that would be three specific things related to SEPTED.
Right. So that's three items that I read in here as you sort of gave as examples.
Those are the three.
Yeah,
It would only be those three.
Do you have the attachments? Yes.
I
If you
have
look
it.
in 232 and
Yeah,
233.6.
Right. And again, there's four other people here that might have a differing opinion, but I just don't feel that that's something you send out there and it doesn't fit within the framework of what I guess I just didn't envision dusk to dawn lighting being associated with the timely response to properties you can simply point at and say, that's clearly a vacated structure and it's clearly in a state of disrepair or neglect or degradation. And dusk to dawn lighting, to me,
I don't think it's clear that it's necessarily in a state of disrepair, though. If it's vacant, I think the idea is if you catch it within 4 months, before all the trees cover all the windows where criminals like to hide, or before the porch light gets busted out from delinquent vandals in the neighborhood. I think the idea is like it just makes the neighborhood safer, and it makes the vacant structure look perhaps like it's occupied and not a vacant structure. I think that's the idea behind the SEPTED principles.
To deter crime.
Right, to deter crime from creating that, preventing that vacant structure from becoming an attractive nuisance in the neighborhood.
The other part of the staff rationale there was the types of crimes that we're seeing occur lower the property values and also make it more difficult for the property to return to productive use. The copper thieves, people breaking out the windows, stealing the wire, all that goes to creating additional barriers to have a productive reuse of the structure. And our thought was that if we were able to say, well, you got to make sure you have better locks on these vacant structures because you don't have someone there every day. And if you have to have lighting, dusk to dawn lights, front porch light at your entrances type of a thing, it would make it for easier observation. That was just our thought process.
Yeah, like I said, there's four other folks here that may buy into that particular piece. I'm not one of them.
And is that for all those items, sir?
For the SEPTED, I don't think that you can. I don't think you're going to be able to quantify those as it relates to the impetus to addressing the vacant structures, as a whole.
If I can just interrupt while you're on that, Kristen, what do you do with, for instance, downtown buildings that are street lit that don't even have exterior lighting that are vacant?
If you have no setback and you have street lighting, then we wouldn't be requiring that there be additional lighting. But if you have a back door and a closed courtyard area, then It would depend on needs.
Right, and that's, and I think that fits maybe somewhat into where Kristen is coming from, because those kind of things are not spelled out. And I would like to avoid the kind of complaints that, because if they weren't spelled out, it says everyone has to do that. I think the concept is good. We may have to add or clarify some things. I'm sorry, Kristen.
We investigated the idea of being more specific. To say some of the SEPTED goals would be to get very specific, but then you can't be flexible. Say someone has a specimen, whatever kind of shrub in their yard, and you just have a rule that says they've all got to be chopped down to 3 feet. Or if all the trees have to be limbed up to 7 feet. It just seemed like it was better to be more flexible to say, we're just trying to keep the doors and the windows clear and to clear the view from the parking, from the sidewalk.
So that when the police are patrolling the neighborhood, they can see clearly to where the doors and the windows are to make sure there aren't.
Or that it doesn't send a signal that this building may be empty
I think
and
that's
neglected.
gonna
Sending that signal, I think,
I
is
think it's going to get real
dicey, though.
gray,
Yeah.
real fast. It's a hugely different perspective than being able to look at a yard and say, you know what, that grass is 3 feet high. I can see that. That's a pretty plain thing. That is a sign of blight and neglect and degradation. Again, I just think it's better when those things are defined and consistent to apply. On the insurance thing, again, I think it's a great concept. I'm not certain I buy into some minimum requirement of $300,000. I think that, if I'm not mistaken on how the sort of the property insurance world works, I mean that there are different figures for different properties. We have tons of different sizes and shapes and scopes of properties out there, and when you're talking about citywide and all types, I'm not really sure how you can assign a specific figure to that. The goal, I think, is that you have property insurance on that property. The goal, I think, is that you're able to have a contact individual. I think the goal is that the property does not look, in a degrading condition. Again, I think it's a great concept. I think it's exactly where at least I envision we want to go. But I feel like the pendulum's just a little bit further than we need to get the job done. Oh, I have one last thing, and that's you cited the residential portion, in terms of how long it's generally on the market. I think you used like 106 days or something. But then you assigned the same language for the residential portion to the non-residential portion, but it didn't say, in terms of 4 months, but it didn't say how long non-residential properties are usually on the market. In other words, it appears that sort of you're using that as your basis, but if on the non-residential side, the average, on the market is 11 months.
And that's something that we can research further. The information that was available online were those numbers of days indicated in the memo. I think in the core of the downtown, we have properties that can be on the market for a considerable period of time and not move.
Yeah, I just felt that non-residential is probably a longer period than residential. That said, I think that no property should go more than 6 months without some type of exterior inspection. And you're okay with the automatic emergency funding into this program if it's blighted? I think you're going to have to do that to get any traction from the outset. I'm just not certain that the commercial residential should either go or be that short or long a period. I think 6 months is a pretty good, and I think we should spell out, because you say inspect the property. And it doesn't specify whether that means you're inspecting the interior and the exterior, or just the exterior.
And the interior.
Well, I hear what you're saying. I'm not certain we'll have the success in the time in which I envision we have the success if the buy-in, frankly, if it is to include the interior inspection. I just don't know how you're going to sort of call up, mortgage bank X and say, hey, we got this new thing, we want to come inside. I mean, for me, and again, this is just me speaking, for me, I think that sort of our immediate goal is to say we've got these blighted, vacated properties within the city. Everybody can see them when they drive by them, and for me, the focus is how can we timely have somebody we can get a hold of that's going to keep the outside of this property from looking like the junk that it does, and keep from degrading the neighborhood that has to live with it around it. And maybe that's just too simplistic of a way to look at it, but that's sort of how I looked at this rolling out.
I think the concern why we would want to get inside the interior is because of the first responder concerns, as well as the property values, because a lot of deterioration can occur in an invisible fashion that's affecting the structural integrity inside the building. Like we had an example of a building up in the Johnson Street neighborhood that from the street, you didn't realize there was a problem going on until one time we had to secure a back door that had been kicked in. It was a vacant building, and realized that the ceiling had come down into that room in the back, and you couldn't tell that from the outside. We found out when we had to secure the door that had been kicked in. And so there's things that can happen in these buildings that we can't tell unless we're inside and we can see the damage that's starting to occur before it gets to the point where if we have to send first responders in there and they're in a very unsafe structure.
Which just means, again, it's going to be even harder to reoccupy and get back onto the reusable tax rolls. Mr. Brubaker, did you want to take it?
Yeah, some of the things Christian noted, I had noted also. I may have a little bit different take, but I had some others. But I have a more general question. I assume that you vetted these, you had legal counsel, and that you vetted them against Maryland code, and that we have a reasonable chance of making this stand up?
I believe we have a reasonable chance, absolutely, sir. And,
Okay, you're within-
and we've had discussions with legal counsel on, in particular, on the designated person, and that's something that we may be challenged on by having a
and how you define it still in it. Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, in terms of having someone within a short area and that definition, and on having a specific amount of insurance, that's something else that we had lengthy discussions on. And that's something that, from a staff perspective, we're looking at more the ease of administration of it. Because what is the appropriate amount of insurance on residential property A as opposed to residential property B, and how would we determine that? And so administratively, it seems simplest to say, if you have a residential property, have $300,000. If you have a commercial, have $1 million policy.
And licensed properties are the rental units. Are they commercial units as well? You use the term licensed properties.
The vacant structures would need to be licensed.
Okay, so it's any property that's come into the program.
Yes.
Okay. The 4 months the continuous vacant gives me a little bit of heartburn in that I know of instances where people have had immaculately maintained properties that were vacant for longer than 4 months, much better than some of their neighbors. And I guess I have a little concern of penalizing somebody that does a good job, bringing them into this program. I mean, they have reporting requirements, they have a fee right away, right?
Yes, sir.
And I guess something strikes me that somebody that does a great job is going to get treated the same as the person who's virtually let it go, Maintaining the property, but they get brought in anyhow. They've maintained their property. 4 months is automatic. And I guess that bothers me a little bit because you're penalizing someone who might be doing a great job has great concern for their property and is taking care of it, you know. So,
You wouldn't know that it's vacant if they're doing a great job.
No, you would.
yeah.
A good example would be someone who's trying to sell their house.
Yeah.
Really trying to sell their house.
Really trying to
And
sell
they're
their
working
house,
with a
they mow the
realtor
lawn and trim the shrubs,
and
but they're
maybe-
brought in anyhow.
Maybe their price is too high, but they have their house in absolute saleable condition versus what we're talking about, which is essentially foreclosed properties that aren't even on the market. And I tend to agree with Martin. I think that people that are legitimately trying to sell their property, because people who are legitimately trying to sell the property are not allowing it to go into a blatant condition.
But that
they're
word,
not legitimately trying
But that
to
word
sell.
legitimately is hard to define. I mean, you got to
it
give
is
them.
impossible to define by way of statute, but for discussion purposes,
Yeah.
well, no, seriously.
It is.
You have to first come up with the general theory of what
I mean,
you're trying
there's
to do.
houses that are technically for sale, but you know, nobody's trying.
Right, and the other question comes in, as I see it, I'm not sure that I understand where we get these people who have been foreclosed and have been put out of their home but are still record owners. That's also a concern of mine, because I do not expect somebody who is facing foreclosure and has been evicted from their home because of it to suddenly be signing up, registering property that from their purposes they don't own anymore. And they're certainly not about to pay a fee as an owner. And then if the bank and everybody blows everybody off, I see these quote owners are subject to a $500 a day fine. And I have some issues with that. I know the intent. But as I read the definition of owners, you could have like 3 or 4 owners at the same time, right? You could have the property owner of record. You could have the bank who is in foreclosure but hasn't taken a legal ownership.
Yes, sir.
And or you could have a bankruptcy trustee.
Yes, sir.
And right now I'm mainly talking, and my initial thought is residential property. My brain hasn't gone over to the other side yet, but I just see poor folks in residential foreclosure proceedings who may not be anywhere near here. They're gone. And their house is blighted. I've talked about my next door neighbor repeatedly. There's a good example. I can't imagine the record owner of that property, us expecting him actually to have any responsibility for the property at all. He may be the owner on paper, right, but that's all he is. You know, I mean, if I were that person, I'd have trouble thinking about, I'm going to register this property, I'm going to pay a fee for this property, and then finding out maybe that person is Oklahoma, moved to Oklahoma, and the city sends them a thing saying you're subject to a $5,000 fine because your property's in this shape, and actually you're the only one we can get a hold of because the bank won't communicate to you. These are issues that I think need to be figured out, and they're not easy.
Well, and if I may, sir, they're not easy issues, and they're issues that involve a lot of staff time and research. But I think we have a skilled staff to work through these issues. In terms of, yes, if we have an owner of record, that's who we're initially going to contact. If a foreclosure has been filed, and if the information is available through the judiciary case search or available through the state of Maryland database for foreclosures, then we would be sending our letters and our fines to the financial institutions. But we would not be able to develop an ordinance that addresses each possible scenario. Staff are going to have to look at the scenarios and say, all right, this is vacant, it's foreclosed, we have an owner of record, but we don't have the financial information. Let's get the property started in the process. Let's go ahead and send an application and invoice for the fee. Let's place a lien against that property for the fee, which is going to pay for the staff to be able to go out and do the inspection and ensure blight is addressed quickly, and then conduct the necessary research to go after the financial institutions.
And everywhere you've gone so far is fine with me, because what you've done is you've indicated that if the owner doesn't pay the fee, that it will go as a lien against the property, which is
Yes,
just
sir.
fine. I have no problems with any of that until I get into the penalty phase. That's where my concern is, that we're opening up that same person to a potential fine of $500 a day for not bringing their property into shape where there is no way, shape, or form that a foreclosed property owner is going to start expending money to take care of that property. That's where my problem is. I totally understand getting the initial phase in, getting them the application, because if they totally blow that off and say, forget it, which they're going to do, they're not going to fill it out, they're not going to care, and they're not going to be responsible, but the property will be for the fee that is associated with what we're doing. But when we get to the phase where we say, okay, not only didn't they pay the fee, not only didn't they fill out the form and register, well, first of all, because they didn't register, now they're subject to $500 a day for every day that property's out there that they didn't register. I mean, those are my concerns, and I understand that as we all sit here collectively and say that we have good staff, that's today. I don't know what tomorrow brings. And you're not going to be here tomorrow, I'm not going to be here tomorrow, and I won't be responsible myself to allow legislation that could allow somebody in that situation to be subjected to substantial fines. And, you know, we all read things in the paper. Sometimes we say, well, judges wouldn't do something like that. We wouldn't do something like that. And, you know, I'm sure there are law firms around here that have people sitting in jail that didn't think they were going to be sitting in jail because judges wouldn't do that. So,
Would it satisfy your concern, sir, if we put in the ordinance that if a property is shown to be in foreclosure, that the penalties would be to the financial institutions?
Sure, John. Again, I think what we're doing tonight is pointing out concerns that we have, and along those lines, I'll say this also. When it comes to getting this program started and getting this program implemented and trying to accomplish what we want to do, on its send-off, I agree with Kristen. I think that we need to immediately take on immediate needs. I understand, Kathy, what you're saying about the interior inspections and the need for them. I'm not disputing that. But I also understand right now the biggest issues are what we need to deal with first. And I would be much more concerned of taking care of those things and finding out we get bogged down in spending the amount of time on the interior inspections. I would prefer to see everything done exterior first before we get to the next level, is what I'm saying. Maybe phase this in. See what happens after we do phase one. Find out if maybe that didn't accomplish a lot more than we thought it would. Maybe find out it didn't accomplish nearly as much as we thought it would. But I would be happier if we did a phase one on this. Yeah, I think that that with the inspection ability we're going to have, I would rather see every one of these vacant buildings have exterior inspections before we start doing interior inspections, is what I'm saying. It's clearly going to take time. You have to make arrangements to get inside. You don't have to make arrangements to be outside. Be outside, you just show up and you do your inspection. To get inside the building, you got to find out who the person is who's responsible for it. You got to get in touch with them. You got to make arrangements to get the keys, assuming the place is locked up the way it is. And, you know, I don't know of any right we have, and maybe we do, to go into people's properties without their consent. That's another thing to discuss here as far as interior inspections. I don't know the answer to that. Do we just have the right to tell somebody we're going into their property, residential or non-residential, without any basis except that we want to inspect it?
I think if we're saying it's vacant and it's causing blight in a neighborhood, I would think we have some kind of right to do that.
But we're not
Well,
saying
but
that.
we're not saying they
if
all
it's strictly
cause blight.
vacant
We're
that
just
we have
saying
the
if it's
right to go
vacant,
in.
is the
We're not saying if it's vacant and a blight. We're saying if it's a vacant property, we have the right to go into it.
Yeah, again, I guess for me, you cite that there's nearly 1,200 vacant properties.
Residential.
Residential, and then there's
87.
87.
Yeah, under 100 non-residential. For me, like I guess I envision, of that number, there is some number of that which is clearly causing a deleterious sort of condition within the neighborhood, and those areas I think are the areas where
I guess really what we're all saying is what I think I'm hearing and what I'm thinking myself is our concern is not vacant properties on one level, it's blighted properties. There are vacant property issues that we've always had, and that's why we have a vacant property ordinance. We have the non-residentials. I was in one. I rented one that was vacant for part of it for 16 years and was shocked to find out when they came in and did a breaking and entering, well, all you had to do is walk up and go in the place. It wasn't secured at all. I mean, my place was secured, but if you wanted to walk in the upper floors, it had no security. So I understand that, but I think what this council has been talking about when we discuss these vacant property issues is the blight associated with them.
I think my thinking is that the longer it sits vacant, the more likely it's becoming a blight on the neighborhood. So
Mayor,
wherever that magic point is, whether it's 4 months or 6 months.
But when we talk about phases, when we talk about phases.
I don't know if it's phases as much as priorities.
Well, priorities, we're talking words. I would take
Yeah.
priority as a good word. Priority is probably a better word. My priority would be, first of all, that we identify the vacant blighted properties and go after them. That's what my priority would be. My next priority would be something else. And that fits in with what Councilmember Brubaker says. And what we're saying, you got people who have their properties listed with a realtor. Listen, there's some properties I've seen in Fountainhead, for instance, that were vacant for Bruce Quinn's place. How long was that at least up for sale? Okay.
For a year and a half.
Many of these places sit vacant because of the prices that people are seeking that are in excellent condition because they are, we say that word legitimately for sale because we all know what that means. If people are actively really trying to market
What
their
if there was
property.
some exception for actively marketed properties? Like you have a for sale sign
What
in
I'm
front of your house.
seeking is staff to try, unless I'm wrong with what we're trying to do as a mayor and council right now, is I think you hit the word priority. I'm not saying that what staff is presenting is not an appropriate thing to do. But if what we want to do is get bang for our bucks, if what we want to do is, like the pop-up people said, get people to see what this community can look like quickly, we want to address these blighted properties quickly. When we get the blighted properties addressed, we can then see what's going on at that stage of the game. Again, as with Councilman Alshire, I'm much more concerned about, I don't really care whether my neighbor's house has that light on, dusk to dawn, as much as if you took a look at it and saw the porches literally, not figuratively, but literally falling down on themselves, and you take a look at it, you would go, oh, that's a property that's blighting this neighborhood. And they're obvious, they're visible, they're clear, and those are the properties we need to be going after.
And I think a good example of that is if you follow conversation on Facebook at all, one about the Planet Aid container out at the old Giant Eagle, which is apparently in some deplorable condition because of the donations out there. So that conversation generated, I don't know, 100 comments and people to take action to go out and clean it up, I think, last night. There isn't a single conversation going on about the vacant empty house next door, which I don't know if Mr. Gross still owns it or not, but the one that was going to be a commercial place at one time, and then it sort of went back into dormancy. Again, that's an example of those two obvious different conditions that I think prioritize, whatever word you want to use. I guess I just have this vision that our approach would be a bit more direct and obvious and simple.
How does
And
what's
what you're
being,
talking
how
about
does
is
what's
two-
being proposed not get at what we're
Mayor,
trying to
you're
do?
talking about two different things. Okay, in my opinion, one is the actual ordinance. Okay, the other is how we want it implemented. I think you got the right word when you said priority versus phases. So that if I were to look at this and say, for instance, we were to pass this ordinance as written, I would want to say to staff, I don't want you to worry about the interior inspections. I don't want you to worry about the dusk to dawn lights. I don't want you to worry about these things until after we have identified every one of the bladed properties and dealt with them. I think that's what we're saying.
But shouldn't we keep those SEPTEV requirements for those blighted properties?
I'm not.
I mean, wouldn't that greatly improve the conditions in those ones that we have prioritized and identified?
That's what I'm saying. I think the discussions taking place here are much more about how we implement it and what we do than to say, no, we don't want these things.
Because I think the ordinances, as they're written and amended, I think really hit the nail on the head. I think they get at the liability to first responders, the liability to taxpayers, the property values, the
absolutely
assessable
do, Mayor,
base.
but I got to tell you what I really don't want to see, because they would be appropriate, okay? It would be appropriate in 4 months. What I don't want to see is a whole bunch of realtors here with the photographs, but you're writing an ordinance, Mayor, that says that. You're talking about an ordinance that says if you have a property that's been on the market for 4 months that is in absolute superb condition, they have the staff is going to do the same thing with that property that they're going to do with the bladed property. And what I'm saying, and what I think we're all saying, is we don't want that. We do not want that. We think it's a waste of staff time, and it is against the interest of our citizens. It's absurd, and you will have that. You would have realtors just lined up
Wouldn't be a surprise.
If we
included language to exclude that, I would expect.
No,
them to still
but
come
there's
and
one thing
have
to
some
say they're going
opinion
to
on that.
disagree with what we're doing. There's another thing to be able to come in and show us what we have done and say what we have done is wrong. And what I'm saying is we've had that in the past with other inspection activities. The most infamous one, was the strainer in the sink. And I don't want our staff to be looking for strainers in the sinks. And we are the legislative body that need, if we don't put the right language in here, then we are not sending the right message. We can have this discussion today, and our staff is here today, and they're going to address it today, but this statute's going to be here 2 years from now, 3 years from now. We're not going to be here, staff's not going to be here, and the statute is going to be here, and it's not going to say what we want it to say. And,
I think we'll definitely put this, I think the plan, I was consulting with, hold on 1 second. We're not going to talk about the third parking deck today. We're going to delay that discussion until next week. I think
I'm only trying to continue what I started.
Yeah, Martin started.
I think we're going to have a work session prior to our regular session next week, so we can talk more about this issue. We can all do more research. Staff can come back with more ideas. So I don't think we're going to be ready to introduce this next week. And I think it would be appropriate for us to continue this discussion. And we'll also talk about the third parking deck at that time. But go ahead, Mr.
Well, I just wanted to make a point. In order, if we're going to continue the discussion, I just had concerns, and I think there's, I'm not as concerned at some point with the internal inspection. I'm not sure when that ought to be. Maybe after that first year or something. I am concerned, as I said, about properties that are well maintained, automatically coming into the program. maybe there's a trigger. I don't think it should be 4 months in the current market. And I do understand about going inside at some point, because I walk past vacant properties in my neighborhood and say, I wonder what's happening inside there. I wonder if there's not water running or leaks in the roof, and which messes up the property on the outside after a while and blights the neighborhood because it's harder to sell. So I think there is a time to go in, and I think we need to discuss it, and we need to discuss that sort of pristine property issue. The other thing I had was, I did circle the $300,000. That was, I think that's way more than the replacement value of most residential properties in Hagerstown, way more. And so I have a hard time living with $300,000. That's asking a lot for people to boost that up. You have 100,000 property worth $100,000, of which there's quite a few, 150, and you have to maintain 300,000. I know it's hard to do a value, and assessed values aren't accurate. I realize the difficulty. I just don't think 300,000 works.
What about $1 million for non-residential?
I just don't know how you apply.
If you're talking about
for
property
one
replacement,
non-residential might be worth $5 million,
right.
and why would you want to say it has to be $1 million?
Another question is, will an insurance company write a policy for more than a property is valued at? If we're talking about,
so if
we're not talking about a liability policy here, we're talking about replacement policy. I mean, if I go in,
right.
And they might, I don't know. I don't
well,
know
maybe
the answer
is this
to that.
both? I mean, this doesn't specify. It's property liability insurance. It doesn't say
I
replacement
just
value.
think the replacement. Maybe we ought to just say replacement value and argue about it if it's necessary or something. I don't know. I can see a requirement to have the insurance. I'm not arguing about that. I'm just trying to think maybe we should say replacement value and only argument if we have to. I don't know.
What about liability? Like if someone goes in and in a vacant building and
there's provisions in most policies, and it's I don't know what those are. I'd have to look into.
Just ended the policy. Period.
Well, some people carry a way too low.
Well, anyway, it's a point for further consideration.
Yeah, it's a
I guess,
point
is
to
what
look
you're
at.
saying.
I think, Lou, we've got to remember that what we're trying to do here is also deal with crime and deal with attractive nuisance is the word I wrote down, which is an old term, going way back with urban renewal and all that stuff. So, and it's a legal term, I know. It's illegal. You can't have if somebody gets hurt on your property, did you have an attractive nuisance, right? So,
and I do,
but I don't have as much problem as Christian did with the SIPTED principles. I think they're reasonably clear, and boy, one thing that makes me look at a property and wonder is when the shrubbery's gotten overgrown.
So did the criminals. The criminals start wondering too, Marty.
Right, I know. I just said that, avoiding vacant things. But I'm just illustrating some concerns. I guess I understand the annual basis, but I presume we reserve the right to go in if there's some level of deterioration. Like if we say it's going to be once a year, and then we decide 4 months in that property is really hurting, is this written so we can declare that?
The property maintenance code is written in such a way that we would be able to, one, get inside the property, and two, conduct additional inspections.
And what about what about Lou's question, if, again, we have the pristine property, and let's say we decide to make it annually. What right do we have to say we want to go inside your property?
The ordinance.
I mean, when there's no evidence of any blight or any bad conditions.
The ordinance would specify. It's
just the ordinance per se.
It's much like the rental licensing ordinance. It says
when you go to register, you're basically saying.
The rental licensing ordinance, we justify being able to go into homes because we say they're a business. But a residential home that is owned by an individual is not a business.
But we still have the duty to protect the public health, safety, and welfare.
Well, you have the same duty to do that in an occupied home. And you can't come into my home, thank you. I don't see where the Fourth Amendment allows us to tell somebody who's not in a business, but in a residential owner-occupied home that's vacant, that we have the right. I mean, the Fourth Amendment says you have the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures.
It's not unreasonable if you have a vacant property that could potentially
Why?
cause blight in your neighborhood.
Well, if you have, but we're not saying potentially.
We're not saying blighted property.
We're saying
we're saying a
vacant.
normal house.
Yeah, we're saying
for
a
sale
vacant
that has the
property.
potential to become blight if
Sure
it
it does.
remains
So does-
vacant.
I don't know. It's just
But
something
listen, we have owner-occupied properties that are blighted properties, and we do not have the right to go into those homes without a warrant. And they are blighted. And we're talking about giving government the right to enter into a vacant, and plus the fact I got to tell you what else you got to do in this ordinance. You need to define the word a little better, because you use, in one place you use the word vacant, and another place you use the word completely vacant. And I don't know what the difference is between completely vacant and vacant. And I don't know what the definition of vacant is either, because I talk about my next door neighbor. There's nobody living there. But take my word for it. There are people that are doing laundry there. There are people, and these are good neighbors. I don't mean to sound like they're bad. They still come and mow the lawn. Not as frequently as they did when they lived there. And this home is vacant from the point that no one lives there.
You're going to become an attractive nuisance, Lou.
I got a house around the corner that only the dogs live there.
Well, and right, is that a vacant home? If it has furniture in it.
My
is
neighbors
it,
there might
Well,
maybe 1 month out of the year.
you know,
well, and Mayor, we're doing another work session, and that it's clear that we have to. There's a lot of issues here that need to be discussed. The intent is absolutely, you're right, John and Kathy, you all have come right with what the intent of this council is to get accomplished. Now we just got to fine tune it. This is not criticism of what you guys have done. You come forth with a comprehensive ordinance. I would much rather see staff come with this big ordinance that we take and chip away to where we like it, than to come with something that we have to say, well, why didn't you put this in here? Why didn't you put that in there? What do you mean this is in here? I think you all have done an excellent job of presenting the overall policy, what we need to do, and now we have to fine tune it and get it implemented. That's all.
And Mr. Munson, Ms. Nye, we haven't heard from either of you. Do you have anything
I'm
to
on
offer?
vacation.
When? Next week or?
No, now.
Oh, okay.
I just decided this whole meeting, I'll just be on vacation.
Okay, Mr. Munson?
I think a lot of really good points have been raised today. We're moving into an area where none of us can see what the consequences are going to be in a few years, and that's been pretty well pointed out. I do think that in order to handle what we could handle, though, that starting out with, as you indicated, Lou, blighted properties at least is a good place to start out. I think I can name 6 of them in my neighborhood, or close, within a half a dozen blocks anyhow. And if there was some concentration, some particular concentration on those properties with a intent to do something about that, and as they move away from the blighted property arena, then this could apply to other properties. We are getting to some tough issues here, and I think you may be right about the Fourth Amendment.
I think John made an excellent point at the beginning when he said that it's not very useful to have an ordinance if you don't have some kind of program of enforcement. And I think that ultimately that's the goal of this. You know, these ordinances exist. I think the schedules for enforcement are, as pointed out in the memo, don't work.
That's the issue.
Yeah, and so we have to create more teeth in the existing ordinance as it. I also want to point out another part of the memo at the end The challenge, of course, is to find productive new uses for these vacant properties or to attract new owners who put them back into productive use. And we also have to have a revenue stream for large abatements. I mean, we all see the problems with these blighted properties and we all want them addressed. And we need some kind of funding stream to go out there and actually do that once we've identified these properties and got them.
I saw an estimate of $158,000 in here.
That's for the cost. What was identified by staff was $308,553 in transfer tax in the city of Hagerstown, which is an issue I think Councilmember Alshire raised previously about what kinds of help and support we might get from the county.
That conservative projection of 158, that's based upon 75% of the number of vacant structures multiplied by the fee that's proposed here. So bringing on the requisite staff and having their overhead covered, that would eat up that 158.
Right, that's what I was figuring. Yeah.
But in terms of actually carrying out the work, we currently spend about $100,000 a year cutting grass, cleaning up trash and debris throughout the city. And that's our current efforts. Having these additional efforts and on these blighted properties, we're going to have to do some more work. It's not just going to be cleaning up trash necessarily. We may be putting on new roofs as properties sit vacant to arrest the deterioration. And we would be going through a court process and getting court authorization to do that work, and we'd be able to lien the properties. But we would still need an initial revenue source to cover that. That's not something that we traditionally budget for.
Well, theoretically, it'd be a revolving fund.
It would.
Because you'd have the liens on the property.
Sir. And we would need at least initial seed money.
Right, and I know you do liens when you mow the lawn.
Yes, sir.
And so forth, so.
And unfortunately, we do a lot of liens to recover our cost.
I had a question about the liens. When we go to a property and enforce it, it's one of the foreclosures, and we know that's an issue. The legislature should have passed stuff about that years ago, but they haven't. So, but can we do a lien first without going to the quote owners, the owners that aren't really owners, that have been foreclosed on? Can we do a lien against the property without somehow attaching it to them so that it comes out of the bank when it's sold?
Yes, sir.
I mean, that's how we should be doing it.
And that's how we do it, sir. Under Chapter 223, I believe it is, of the City Code, it's a tax ordinance.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm talking about.
And that's what we do. As a matter of routine, any charge that's specific to a property, when it's not paid, we bill it as taxes.
Putting it against it, and when the bank sells it for whatever, whenever they decide to do that, it comes out of it. So,
yes, sir.
So we do. Pardon?
That's routine for us.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think
So doesn't that address the issue that Lou was talking about, not going after the phantom owners?
No, my issue was the penalty, the $500
penalty.
Yeah, which is not abated.
We can't use that as a lien. I guess I'm getting around to my other question. We can't use that as a lien.
Well,
that allows the lending institution to carry that against the owner.
We would issue a citation against the owner, and if it's a foreclosed property, we'd be going after the financial institution. First, the court would have to find that, yes, I'm upholding, the judge would say, yes, the $500 fine stands. Then we would work with the city attorney to file a lien against the property for that. And the fines can be attached to the property, but it's done through the city attorney.
That's what I'm talking about, the foreclosed properties.
Yes, that's done through the courts and the city attorney as opposed to administratively just us placing a lien.
Yeah.
All right, well, this has been a healthy debate on a very important topic.
Thanks again. Thanks a lot for being energetic and working on this stuff and bringing it. I think we really do appreciate it, and you ask us to work on it.
So I think we have a good list, and we will come back with some thoughts on each of the issues that you all raised here this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all very much.
We're going to move the third parking deck discussion to next week. And we'll talk about transportation priorities because I think there's a deadline coming up with some state highway things that Rodney wanted to get our feedback on.
Okay.
Thanks for hanging in there.
No problem. Excuse me. Well, every year, as you know, the Secretary of Transportation does a tour of the state, and this year they're visiting on October 16th. And it's always a good idea for us to put together a letter of our transportation priorities. We do it every year, but I think these letters are important because the Secretary and also the Administrator are aware of what our priority letters say. When we talk about future projects and things that we want to do here in our community, oftentimes they'll refer to these letters that we would send them about what our priorities are. So we can put in that letter whatever you like. I just made some suggestions in here, and feel free to give me your feedback. I'll just buzz through them here quickly. Of course, highway user revenue is kind of a broken record, but we continue to need to keep the pressure on to try to increase whatever revenue we can there. That's how we fund our pavement preservation program. If you remember last year, I was here and said we need to spend about $1 million a year just to stay even with the pavement condition that we have. And Michelle put together a little chart on the second page that shows that historically we were up almost to $2 million. The Great Recession hit and it dropped to a low of $161,000 in FY11, and it's been hanging around $330,000. But the last 2 years they did give us an extra stipend of additional funding that puts us up around $1 million, but there's no guarantee of that going forward. So we need to keep that pressure on that. The Eastern Boulevard Corridor, which is a county-driven project, but also kind of ties to the professional court extension project, is also something we had in our letter last year. You recall when Rob Slocum from the county and I made a presentation about professional court extension. We have agreed to work with them on the design of the extension. They are currently in the process of hiring an engineer using the state procurement process, so it takes a while, and they hope to get that design process started here in the next month or two. What is Maryland Route 60? Route 60 would be Lyersburg Pike. Maryland Route 64.
Jefferson.
Boulevard.
And the only concern I have is this Yale Drive Extended doesn't really,
Doesn't even include it.
can't even see Eastern Boulevard or the bridge that goes along with that.
Okay.
That's my only concern about the attachment.
Oh, I think this.
It doesn't really show the whole.
I mean, we have a map that talks about the Professional Boulevard Bridge and Roadway.
Yeah.
Or speaks to it, but it doesn't include it.
Yeah, all you see is Yale Drive.
And the title is Eastern Boulevard Corridor Improvements. What I reiterate every year is I don't want us to lose sight or focus on the very real need, not speculative land development need, but very real traffic transportation need now of Eastern Boulevard being extended and dualized out of the city through the north end, around the YMCA. I mean, to me, that's a real now, needed today, needed yesterday transportation priority. Not a speculative one. Which
So
no one's shown me figures for Jefferson Boulevard that says it's at a failing or even a near failing traffic volume capacity. It's nowhere near it.
So would it be possible to have something more comprehensive that has all for the
Yes,
Eastern Boulevard corridor improvements?
I think I put the wrong map in the packet, to be honest with you.
Well,
To be
that's
very
okay.
honest.
You're a human
There's so many
being.
generations
Even
of
the
maps
best
on
city
this.
engineer in the country can make a mistake every once in a while, right?
I apologize for that, but we'll definitely have a better map that explains what that phase is.
I think the main advantage, and I'm not saying anything about city participation, but the main advantage of the professional court bridge is relieving Eastern to some extent by people being able to access the hospital and the college without going out to the dual highway.
That's right.
And also shortening it should have been built when the hospital was built. It's shortening the time from the central and northern parts of Hagerstown to the hospital by 5 to 10 minutes. I mean, it should have been done a long time, it should have been done originally, and it's almost a crime that it wasn't.
The only comment I have related to that would be that we need.
And I agree with Kristen that the grade crossing at the railroad, for instance, on Eastern and things like that, badly need.
The extension and dualization of that should not take a backseat to this extension.
I guess the question is, what role will State Highway play in that?
Yeah,
Right, I mean,
none of them are state highways.
On those portions, those are actual state roads.
They're connecting too.
They're connecting.
This road isn't. So when I say we're going before MDOT to ask for something, I like to focus on things that are actual state related.
Eastern's not a state road either. That's the issue. I mean, some of us have suggested that become Route 60 and that into the city where it's not maintained anyhow and it's not posted or marked, that be the business designation, which gives us a business, which is kind of good.
Right.
But, you know, and have the state pick up Eastern. But you know, I've suggested that to the county over the years, but it's like, anyhow.
One thing that I think, I don't know if it should be included in this, but I see it every time I go on the dual highway is, and I don't know how we can partner with the county to make this a priority, but it's so obvious when you're on the dual highway, when you're in the city, when you're in the county, because when you're in the city, there's sidewalks, because we worked to do this sidewalk retrofit. But when you're not in the city, there's no sidewalk. And every day, it seems like every day there's more pedestrians crossing over, whether it's at Edgewood. Edgewood has like no safe pedestrian crosswalks. Eastern has one, I think, on the northern part of Route 40 that goes that cuts across 40 Eastern Boulevard. But there's no safe way to cross that bridge over the Antietam. And if I had a magic wand, I would wave it and I would build a pedestrian bridge across the Antietam Creek on the northern side of the Antietam Creek Bridge. But I think pedestrian access all along the dual highway should be a priority, not just for the city, but for the city and the county and the state.
Yeah, I agree with you. I met with the district engineer and Rob from the county just a few weeks ago on that, and they are going to institute a study to look at the whole pedestrian safety of that corridor, not just sidewalks, but also things like lighting.
Maybe a fence like they did in the Frederick to keep people from crossing.
Exactly.
The big problem out past Edgewood, if you're going towards 70, is you have all this residential development on the northern or eastern side, you know, with the apartment complex there, and then all the tree neighborhoods back there, and then the grocery stores across the street.
Oh yeah.
And the restaurants and the Walgreens and everything else. So more and more there's traffic that's just crossing over there right before you get to that Edgewood intersection after you get off of 70. And more people are just going to get hit and killed out there, unfortunately, or injured until something gets done. And I think that we should not wait until that happens.
Okay. I'll add that to the list.
I think 81 widening is a perfect idea. I think everyone supports that. It helps the whole region economically. And then more sidewalks is always a good thing.
Yeah, number 4 is kind of the pedestrian bicycle component of transportation. I think we've had 7 retrofit sidewalk projects in the city, and I think almost 6 or 7 safe routes to school sidewalk projects. So we have been really benefiting from that, but we have other ones we want to do, just like what you're talking about on the dual highway. The Transportation Alternative Program is something that we could possibly build some trails in the future as we try to develop more off-street trails. And of course, the bicycle enhancements, we wouldn't do anything without that funding from the state. So those are all good things to continue to ask for. So I think back on Eastern Boulevard, I think I need a better map that shows the Eastern Boulevard corridor, if I'm understanding what you're saying, along with the... the future bridge and how it relates to
Eastern Boulevard. Eastern Corridor. And as Kristen says, the Eastern Boulevard, it's not a state highway, but neither are the bridge and the other roads.
Correct.
Yeah. You know.
But the idea is that the eases congestion on those state highways.
Oh, yeah. And that's the argument for the state putting money. That's the big argument, besides the access to the college and the hospital.
So everyone's good with those suggestions?
I'm fine with those, but I would point out, I think your original list here was a pretty good list. Funds are limited, and these hit some pretty good, your original list hit some pretty good priorities.
So I'll just use that plus the dual highway.
Especially number 1.
Yeah.
Well, what Kristen was mentioned, though, is part of the Eastern Boulevard corridor improvements, what Kristen was talking about. That was a package that was taken to Annapolis and lobbied, the whole corridor.
As a package.
As a package, yeah.
I wanted to involve.
So maybe we ought to make sure that this is written to.
Make sure that's clear.
Clear, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I think the county's dropped on that a little bit, although they say Eastern Boulevard corridor improvements down under their priority, that I hope they mean the whole thing.
They do.
Because that grade crossing is going to be expensive, for instance.
Right. They have it on
The
there.
railroad, I mean, eliminating the grade crossing.
All right. Thank you,
So
Rodney.
I'll put together a letter for your signature then, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney.
Thank you.
Last but not least, we sort of lumped these two things together, the Community Lobbying Coalition and MML legislative action. So let's do the lobbying thing first. Any updates on there was a meeting just yesterday or Monday? That was yesterday.
Yeah, Kristen may have comments too. We put a list in that was from the first meeting. The only addition I can think, I mean, each item was discussed as sort of where is it, you know, and I'm not going to go through all that.
No.
It isn't just.
I just was
but
wondering
Kristen
if-
made a good suggestion, and that was to put the Macintosh, the 7 or 8 of the points that the legislation that she had for Baltimore, but we have to put that together in order to do that, and but you know she's pretty prominent down there, so with that name on it, you know, and if we have to look at them ourselves. I mean, again, I think we need to rehash them, but I thought that was a good suggestion, and you know they keep. I'm very wary of the New Jersey model district zoning authorization and the
Where is that?
county. That's right in the middle of community development. You know, that's the
New
stuff that
Jersey
supposedly
model.
was
That's
done,
new
I
to
think,
me.
in Glassboro and some other places. The New Jersey, and they said that.
I thought this was
They said our staff has it
Pennsylvania.
all.
I thought this was
No, that's down below. That's down below under tax policy.
Yeah, which I suggested instead of exploring the tax policies of other states.
Right.
As far as the city's concerned, that have passed, we should be exploring tax policies that would benefit us that have already passed in this state.
Right.
That delegates such as Macintosh have implemented for comparable cities like Baltimore that would benefit us with some immediacy.
Any other comments or questions on?
Yeah, well, again, the only thing is on the New Jersey model, they claim that we have that model. So I don't know what that is exactly, except it's one more, you know, special thing that applies in New Jersey. You know.
Well, it's a new one to me, so I'll
Yeah,
have to
well, they claim we
get
have
more
it, so
information.
if we don't,
We'll look for it.
we'll look for it. And the day in Annapolis is going to be February 4th. Similar agenda as last year. They're looking for a grabber to get more attendance at the reception. You know, Nora Roberts was suggested, things like that. I don't know how many legislators that would attract, but. So, you know, otherwise there's another meeting August 27th. 1:30. I cannot go. I've got another meeting conflicting with that, so.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
You're going to go?
Kristen got it.
Okay, good.
Yep.
All right. Any other comments on the coalition? How about the MML legislative action? Marty?
Well, we have a meeting tomorrow on the 10 points that were included in your memorandum, and which is somewhere in my pile. But I can do them from memory. The ones that like I said last week, and I haven't changed my mind yet, I thought ours were good. Highway user revenue, it's the old standby, and I'm trying to see if we can do some fresh approaches to it rather than just say it's our priority at MML. The double taxation issue, which is, well, complicated setup. It's, MACO hasn't coordinated at all in the special study. And once again, there's resistance. At MML, I'm going to say it frankly, and we'll see how it goes. Because the legislative committee makes the choice, you know, the people from the municipalities. The third one is our stormwater management, and I'm told that's getting some interest. And there's four, and there's a something that you know, came up that Rockville and Charles County stirred up with the state, and they're doing a very different interpretation of the way planning is done in Maryland than what's been done for as long as I've been here, since 1970. So, and I discussed it with the Secretary of Planning, who was in town last week. And Rockville's very concerned. It deals with comprehensive plans and how elected bodies can deal with the comprehensive plans. And it's very different. It limits elected officials. So we'll probably be discussing that in more detail tomorrow. First I knew about it was Wednesday a week ago. So most people are stunned and never heard about it. So that's like breaking news. I don't know where we're going to go with that. I couldn't get the secretary to bend much on them changing it. His thing was, well, this has always been the law. And I said, show me jurisdictions that are following that. Nobody is. Everybody's doing it differently, you know, with elected officials having power. So it's really a new interpretation. Whether what the fix is still up in the air.
And so you have...
So, and I'm asking if anybody objects to those 3 or 4 priority items.
I know you stand by the list of priority items
we
as
do,
being
yeah.
highway user, double tax, stormwater, and maybe this land use issue.
Yeah.
I do see the importance of that issue.
Right, right. And I'm not saying some of those other issues might not be, good things to deal with.
Right.
I just don't think they reach the level that the other ones do.
So is everyone good with maintaining the priorities as they were outlined previously? Well, I appreciate the update, though. So this is what came of the most reading of all the
yes,
the
that's
legislative
what came out of all
committee
the stuff that was submitted and
to the committee. Okay.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks for representing
and once
us
again,
then.
there'll be a lot of bills that we look at that come out of the legislature, but that'll be next winter.
Right. Okay. Well, we've reached that time again. Mr. City Administrator, would you like to offer us some comments?
No comments this evening.
Who on the council would like to share their thoughts first? Mr. Metzner.
I have none this evening, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Penny? Ms. Nye?
Sorry, I'm back off of vacation now. No,
So
I'm
close.
only asking quiet, okay? I've heard enough tonight. I've heard enough. What I would love to see...
We're restraining ourselves, Penny.
Well, you better. What I would love to see, and having John and Kathy sitting there and going through this whole thing again, okay? I'm sick of vacant places. I'm sick of looking at the deterioration. I am sick of looking at weeds and everything else. And I hope and pray that we can get to an end before the end of the year with this, okay?
I think that's
reasonable. I'm hoping, because you know, it's when all of these real estate people come in that everybody just becomes afraid. And I'm not one to become afraid, believe me. Also, I would like to see us incorporate somehow with Augustoberfest as when it started before. And I don't know, it may not have started at the beginning, but when they did offer the 50s and 60s music. I would like to be able to see it come back with one of the venues that may be downtown, okay? Yes. Under the stars, yes. And honestly, it did draw. Now, Kristen doesn't, you know.
I remember us doing that a couple of years.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know if
He
you
doesn't know
remember
any
everything.
of the songs, but.
That was part of the Augustoberfest?
Yes, it was. Yes, it
Yeah.
was.
It
But
was like
I
the
would
first
love
night
to
of
be
summer.
able to see that be incorporated. It draws a lot of people. It really does. Well, you know
It's a
what?
big draw at
Dave, was
Penmar
you
Park.
here then?
I don't know, I might have been in high school 20 years ago.
Yeah, we used to do it on a Friday night.
Correct.
Yeah, it was a Friday night.
Saturday.
Right. Correct. And it's right, and it's a good thing, okay? And there's a lot of venues that we do downtown, such as when you're doing car shows, or you're doing bike week, or you're doing any of this, is to incorporate this along with it.
It could be a wind down type of a thing, because we're having a wind down this Friday. The theme is, I think, sports related, but there's no reason why there couldn't be a wind down that's 50s and 60s prior to.
And
Yeah,
maybe
so.
just to pitch in, I think what happened back then too, we did it as part of the Augustoberfest
Yes.
weekend. The CVB director at that time, Ben Hart, had contacts with promoters for those bands, so I think that's partly what led to that, was that he had done some of those events in prior locations.
Well, and I know that there are people out there that
It's a
still
good
are
idea,
promoters
yeah.
that still can do this, okay? And after looking at on PBS, you know, doo-wops and all of the others, and
So
I'm
you're
just
gonna be
thinking,
out there
you know what?
with your
You
hoop
just-
skirt on and doing the jitterbug and all that stuff?
You don't have to do that
or-
route.
I know the
but
jitterbug was a little
there's
before
a lot
the
of
50s
even
and
young
60s.
kids that appreciate that music, and I just think that it would be a good draw. And what I'm saying is that I would like to see it looked at, okay? And Eric isn't here because he looked at, as far as prisoners coming in here, helping us to clean up, and was going to give me the woes on why they couldn't. So I get to hear that scenario too.
Okay.
All right, that was all.
All right, Mr. Munson,
No comments.
Mr. Alshire.
I had some and I don't remember.
You've said enough tonight.
Will the vacant law will
Apply to the almshouse.
No. because it is not blighted.
I agree.
Look at across the street.
Ceasefire.
I agree. Go ahead.
Mr. Brubaker.
Fourth and fifth name drop, as I mentioned, State Secretary of Planning was here, and to talk about infill redevelopment and revitalization, and Hagerstown, they claim is one of their test beds. The mayor and Kathy Marr and I met with him and gave him went over the legislation pretty extensively. Kathy did an excellent critique. And by the way, she's been complimented by several different people on the presentation she made to the other planning directors in Maryland. She did an excellent job, not just representing Hagerstown, but just professionally. And once more, there's another, I'm not going to call it an attack, but it comes out to that in that proposal. It's not, official or anything, but it would try to lock things in at a much earlier stage than even the appointed planning commission or elected officials could deal with it. So we brought that to their attention as well as the other stuff. And I won't do the fifth name drop. The governor went down Potomac Street and enjoyed himself for an hour and a half in Hagerstown.
Well, I'm glad that you guys could host him, as I was still on the streets of Amsterdam at the time. Beginning to think he only wants to come to Hagerstown when I'm not here.
He said that, yeah.
Is that what he said? Oh,
Yeah, he
okay.
said that.
Okay. Well, as far as my comments, last Wednesday, I believe it was, I attended the reunion of the 80th Infantry Division, which drew people literally from all around the world. I was amazed at how many people there were from other parts of the country and even other parts of the world. And it struck me that in thinking about my trip to Germany and the Netherlands and Belgium, and knowing that my grandfather served in the Battle of the Bulge and was injured there, that war had such a profound effect on those people that even this 20-something-year-old young man who is studying American history adopted some graves of American soldiers in a battlefield graveyard not too far from his house. And that just kind of struck me that, even today, that still has an impact on folks. The freedom that they enjoy now because of the sacrifices made by what is called the greatest generation. So it was an honor and privilege to represent Hagerstown there, and I compliment the CVB on their work in getting that group to have their reunion here in Hagerstown. I think this was the second year. So that was great, and today was the USMH New Student Orientation, or welcome. So I got to welcome everybody there. What struck me about that was, there are students, many students who move in from out of the area to Hagerstown, Washington County, just to go to school there. And Mark Halsey, the director, put in a plug for this initiative to create more student housing. And I definitely think there is a market there for that. I asked several students where they live now who moved in from out of the area, and they all said those apartments out by the HCC. So I said, well, would you move downtown if you could, and it was, close to the university? They said, absolutely. If it was the same price, if it was still affordable, I definitely would. So I think there is a lot of potential there. And it doesn't have to be thousands of people. It can start with a dozen or 2 dozen. And I think it's all about creating that critical mass, whether it's student housing, the downtown movement. All of these efforts are leading toward the critical mass of the kind of change we want. The wind down is this Friday evening, along with the pop-up shops and the Augustoberfest. I anticipate it's going to be a great weekend in Hagerstown. We just hope the weather stays cooperative. And that's all I have. So with that, we'll be adjourned. Thank you.
Delaney.